I ask you, what if, right before your eyes, your only love was taken from you? She begged you to save her, but you didn't have the power to do so. Your legs wouldn't move. You lacked both the courage and the strength. The great mage claims it is all useless, that in this world everything is about power, and for some reason even he doesn't know. She is taken away. The power of existence stands above all else, and that day scarred Arudo's life so deeply that he dedicated his entire existence to the pursuit of power. More than 60 years passed. He tried every method, attempted to reach the treasure of the world's most dangerous dungeon, and right there, he died without succeeding. He lived his whole life chasing power, and after his death, he stood before God. Whoever possessed the tear of God earned the right to meet him in the afterlife. God offers him a choice, to rest his soul forever, or to relive the suffering of life for another 20 years. So, to save his life and his one true love, he chooses to be reborn and retrace his steps. And that is how the MC earns his second chance, returning to the time of his birth, seeing his parents again, his mother, beautiful with long hair, and his father, who was still present. Determined not to waste a single second of his life, he wanted to start evolving right then and there, but his baby body couldn't even stand up. Something he didn't have in his previous life was the ability to see a system window containing his stats and skills, something only he could see now. The kid, barely a month old, was trying to speak, thinking he was actually managing it. He remembers that God allowed him to choose a gift. Not knowing what that meant, God explains that everyone is blessed with a gift when they are born. The gift of unbalanced wisdom, the gift of broken martial arts, the gift of absurdly overpowered magic, or even the gift of infinite charisma. It could also be the gift of inventive genius, or lastly, the gift of creation. In his past life, Arudo had the gift of wisdom, and God asks if he wants the same one. This time the MC says he wants a different gift, the gift of creation. The MC, with the wisdom from his past life, was aware of the world's 5 gifts but had never heard of creation, which God had mentioned, so he aimed for that one. The first thing the MC notices is a system window that is unknown in this world, so it might be related to his new gift. Beyond wanting to save the life of the person he loved, the MC also remembers his parents who died when he was only 8 years old. It had been so long, he barely remembered anymore. It happened on the night of his 8th birthday, a goblin attack on his village. All he remembers is feeling pain when his father sacrificed himself so his wife and children could escape. When even that wasn't enough, his mother threw him far away and begged him to run alone at the very least. With no choice, he just ran. And as we know, goblins are lecherous creatures, so you can imagine what happened after Aruta escaped. But enough suffering and sad things now. In his second life, he will do things differently. The first step is to study and progress his intelligence and mental power stats. He studied so much that even his mother thought it was bad. Teasing his father, he trained his mana stats. While kids his age were eating dirt and drawing on the ground, the boy was doing parkour. As other children watched in awe, his agility status and evasion skill level rose. This pattern continued each time Arudo discovered a new ability. 8 years passed in a flash. Arudo sat beneath a tree, honing his innate gift and skills, which steadily grew in power. When his mother returned home, she congratulated Arudo on his 8th birthday. Overflowing with joy, she embraced her son so tightly Arudo worried he might be crushed. His father boasted that Arudo's handsome looks came from him, and declared they would begin Arudo's training immediately, a suggestion his mother readily approved. His mother then congratulated Arudo again, reminding him of his evening trip to the church, to which he agreed. It was custom for all children turning 8 to receive special bracelets. These bracelets served as a form of identity card, and now it was Arudo's turn to receive his. The priest instructed Arudo to stretch out his hands. Arudo, standing in the church, complied, and the priest placed a magic bracelet, proving Arudo's identity, onto his wrist. "It is better to go to the big city with this," the priest advised. "Be careful not to lose it." With the bracelet now on his wrist, Arudo thought, at last. His thoughts then turned to the goblins, who were due to arrive in the village in a few hours. Arudo was already crying. He knew he had to pull himself together. The time had come. Remembering his past self, Arudo resolved to save this village. After leaving the church and reaching the forest, Arudo opened his skill board to check his progress. He reviewed his current status. Arudo noted he likely needed to reach level 15 to significantly increase his physical power. His magic, however, stood at level 32, granting him mastery over all skills accumulated during his 8 years. The only skill Arudo didn't fully understand was the ability to create various functional objects. He realized he hadn't activated this ability before, because he simply hadn't possessed the skill. Concluding that it wouldn't hinder him in battle, Arudo decided to activate it. It was then that Arudo realized the goblins were already in the forest. Spotting them, he quickly hid behind a tree. 3 goblins, likely scouts, had arrived. Arudo reminded himself to stay calm. He had defeated countless monsters in the past. The goblins, noticing Arudo peeking out from behind the tree, immediately charged him. This would be his first fight in his second life. It was time to demonstrate his training. Concentrating his magic, Arudo thought of his daily efforts, resolving not to regret this moment. He was the village's only hope. Arudo unleashed a fiery attack upon the goblins. After killing one goblin, Arudo felt a surge of success, but knew it wasn't enough. As he engaged the second goblin, another attacked from behind. Arudo dodged, realizing he couldn't afford mistakes. After dispatching all 3 goblins, Arudo concluded he needed to strengthen his attacks. He was fortunate he hadn't encountered stronger monsters yet. The moment Arudo dealt with the goblins, the system displayed a level up notification. Arudo felt a rush of satisfaction. He had defeated them and gained a level. The level up left Arudo feeling lightheaded, almost drunk with power, but then he spotted another goblin charging him, sword in hand. The goblin managed to injure Arudo. Arudo wondered, was this truly a new wave of goblins? As he dealt with the immediate threat, Arudo glanced behind him, only to find an entire horde. He had been caught completely off guard. With his injured arm, fighting such numbers seemed impossible. A familiar despair washed over him. Nothing had changed. No matter how he struggled, he couldn't change his fate, Arudo thought, a memory of his beloved flashing through his mind. But then, a fierce resolve ignited. Arudo would not give up. He wished he had tried harder. In that instant, his magic power surged to level 50, granting him a new skill, Grave Reaper. As Arudo saw the system window announcing the level increase, he realized he had acquired the crafting skill. Its true power, he understood, would manifest with higher levels. That's why I couldn't use it before, Arudo mused. At that moment, a horde of goblins amassed behind Arudo. He wondered if they sensed his weaknesses, not his fighting prowess, as they closed in for an attack. What fate awaited him? A moment later, a goblin lunged at Arudo. He narrowly dodged its sword, realizing how close he was to being wounded, and unleashed a fireball. Arudo attacked the goblins, finding it significantly harder with his injured hand, and the relentless onslaught intensified. When a large group of 8 goblins attacked Arudo this time, he felt capable of fighting them off, trying to believe in his own strength. Arudo immediately activated his Grave skill, using magic to send the goblins tumbling into the gorge. Had he truly managed it? It was a grave crafting skill. Gazing at his hands, Arudo rejoiced, a surge of hope telling him his fate could change now that he had saved the village. At that moment, the system displayed a significant level increase, likely due to defeating the goblins. He recalled hearing that a level increase, an opportunity to advance, often brought with it an increasing pain. With that thought, Arudo lost consciousness. Arudo then opened his eyes. He realized he was cold, with something fluttering near his face. Suddenly, he spotted a creature, which promptly hopped away. What was it? A beautiful slime stood before him, revealing its head. Arudo saw a liquid and wondered if he should drink it. After drinking the liquid from the slime's head, Arudo found it surprisingly beneficial. The slime continued to hop, capturing Arudo's attention. What was this creature? Observing it, Arudo concluded the slime wasn't a dangerous monster. In fact, it seemed quite friendly. The slime suddenly jumped onto Arudo's face. He didn't understand what it wanted, and its touch was incredibly ticklish. Soon, Arudo found himself atop a mountain, gazing down at his birth village, a small, picturesque place nestled in nature. The slime looked ahead and indicated something, but Arudo stated he wouldn't return. He had a person to save, a path to follow, but he remained too weak. Perhaps it was all futile. Roughly a mile away lay Kinetagris, one of the finest underground cities. His goal was to conquer its upper floors and raise his level as much as possible. Arudo then remembered his beloved and considered how he could level up. He recalled the city's appearance, the obstacles and battles awaiting him, knowing only 7 years remained until that fated day. As the slime crawled over him, Arudo stood, mentally apologizing to his parents for his sudden departure. He wrote a letter, explaining he had a list of essential tasks he had to complete. Arudo felt this was the end, yet he needed to fix everything. Profoundly grateful to his parents for their boundless love, he was glad to have grown up with them, remembering his father and mother. 8 years had passed, and he was happy, Arudo thought with tears in his eyes, realizing it was time to leave. After leaving his parents' house, the slime followed. Aruto, unsure if it was truly watching him and deeming it dangerous, told it he would go alone. It would be difficult for her to defend herself from monsters, but then the slime began to applaud with its limbs. Since she seemed so worried, Arudo decided she could stay close. Agreeing, Arudo and the slime journeyed on. A month later, after defeating a formidable wolf, Arudo decided it was time for lunch. The slime next to him dragged something along. Arudo realized they were fresh wounds from a new wolf and thanked the slime. She then placed a magic stone directly into Arudo's bag. With magic stones, he wouldn't have to worry about expenses. The slime then placed the stone. It then ran off, seemingly shouting something. Arudo saw where to go. Had the slime truly found them shelter for the night? A moment later, Arudo looked out from behind a mountain. The slime perched beside him. It was a cave, a perfect spot to rest for the night before heading to Kinetagris tomorrow. Roasting barbecue over the fire, Arudo reflected that low-rank monsters here made finding food easy, even without a fight, something he was accustomed to. His body finally was beginning to resemble its previous life's form, fast-growing and unparalleled. A moment later, a system window materialized before Arudo, displaying his level as 32 and his constantly increasing characteristics. He considered that he could raise his level more effectively within a dungeon to become stronger. Arudo sat on a stone, holding another in his hand, and ate a kebab. He noticed the slime that had climbed onto him was also enjoying a kebab. Arudo then offered it rice, wondering if it would truly devour everything. Smiling, Arudo considered what could inspire the slime and looked forward to collecting magic stones. He was delighted to have met it. Then, Arudo asked if the slime was truly a predator, a revelation that came as a small shock to him. Meanwhile, an unseen observer watched Arudo from behind the mountain. Sensing the gaze, Arudo hurled a barbecue skewer directly towards the hiding spot. He registered a swift dodge. The next moment, Arudo realized the entity moved too fast to track, and a subsequent rapid attack struck him. He knew he wouldn't survive a barrage of blows at that speed. Staring ahead, Arudo saw a demon, not a person. A thief, he surmised, here for his magic stones. Moments later, the figure dropped directly in front of Arudo. She snatched his kebabs and, revealing herself as a girl with both human and animal features, stood before him. Arudo stared at her, utterly taken aback. Arudo watched the girl devour his barbecue and asked if she was a monster. She replied that she was a magicka and a traveler, then inquired about his identity. Arudo introduced himself. He privately noted that she didn't seem monstrous at all. In fact, she looked quite friendly. The girl met his gaze. Arudo commented on her very cute ears. She then revealed she was from the squirrel tribe, asking if he'd heard of them, only to immediately dismiss the question, saying she didn't care. Arudo simply regarded her with a question questioning look. Moments later, the girl vanished from Arudo's sight, reappearing by the campfire where his food cooked. She promptly asked if Arudo minded her finishing it. Arudo, bewildered by her sudden movement and where she had appeared from, hadn't even heard a please. Meanwhile, the slime tried to snatch the shish kebab from the girl's hands. The following morning, Arudo awoke to find the girl following him, the slime perched on her shoulder. Arudo asked why. She retorted that Arudo was still a child, and since she needed to go to the cinema, she would follow him. Arudo then asked Majika if she herself wasn't a child. The girl replied that even if one looked like an adult, they remained a child. Arudo insisted he was already an adult, despite planning to go alone. It suddenly dawned on Arudo. Turning to Majika, he suggested they should go now to make time pass faster. Arudo smiled at the girl, and she agreed. Moments later, Arudo pointed ahead, announcing he had spotted Kanitagris. The city's landscape appeared before them, framed by a massive wall. As they approached and passed through the gate, a girl immediately approached, touting low taxes and a clean record, inviting them to enter. Since ancient times, Kanitagris has signified chaos and a wide variety of races. This is due to the dungeon towering in its center, drawing people fascinated by its allure to gather in the city. As Aruto and Majika entered the city, Majika was visibly scared. Arudo asked what was wrong, and she admitted this was her first time experiencing such a crowd of people. Turning to Majika, Arudo explained he himself was from a village. She replied that she lived on the street. Arudo confessed he was nervous upon his first arrival. Majika, surprised, pointed out that Arudo had previously claimed he hadn't been here before. Arudo clarified that he had visited with his parents when he was about 10 years old, remembering how he felt the city was alive, with almost nothing having changed since. Arudo looked around, contemplating. He wondered if anything significant would unfold in the next 2 years, knowing caution was paramount. Majika then asked where he was headed. Arudo replied that he needed to visit the Adventurers Guild to earn money for their stay, then asked if Majika would accompany him. She readily agreed. Upon arriving at the guild, Arudo declared his intention to exchange magic stones. The man at the counter, however, turned to him and stated Arudo was in the wrong place. Arudo looked surprised. The man then told Arudo to leave, claiming the guild was no place for children. Arudo then emptied his bag onto the counter, revealing a pile of magic stones. The man, who had just tried to dismiss him, watched in disbelief, asking where Arudo had acquired so many. Arudo simply replied that he had obtained them through hunting. "This girl standing next to me, whom I defeated, doesn't know how to sell magic stones," Arudo stated, gesturing towards Majika. The man looked at Majika in surprise. She started to protest, about to say she had nothing, but Arudo cut her off, telling her to be silent. Smiling, Arudo then realized the total value amounted to approximately 1990 units. The man then informed Arudo of the exact sum: 2 gold, 29 silver, and 85 copper. Arudo reflected that for such a sum he felt utterly exhausted. He wondered if his exhaustion was simply due to his young age or a consequence of his rapid growth. As Arudo placed the money into his bag, he asked if he could register as a finder. The man questioned why a child wished to register as an adventurer. Arudo pointed to Majika, stating she was an adult, and added that he personally needed to register due to a significant endeavor. Majika started to speak again, but Arudo quickly covered her mouth, urging the man to hurry as they were short on time. As they left the guild, Majika turned to Arudo, telling him to take her with him and make use of her. Arudo, asking for clarification, then apologized. He explained that at his age it was difficult to articulate everything clearly, so he merely asked for assistance. He then asked Majika if it wasn't wise to spend time acquiring magic stones, to which she replied that it wouldn't improve his reputation. Majika, walking behind Arudo, then heard him dismiss the idea of reputation. "No one gets stronger by merely increasing reputation," he stated. Majika looked at Arudo, clearly surprised by his words. Arudo walked ahead of Majika, stating that with money now in hand, they should find a hotel. He proposed sharing a meal to thank her for her help, but also offered to part ways there if she had other plans. Majika agreed to go with him, but not without a condition, either money or they spend time in his room. Hearing this, Arudo simply told her to follow him. What a woman she was, Arudo mused to himself. As evening fell, Arudo expressed his genuine pleasure that Majika had joined him, admitting he had initially expected her to refuse. Seated in their room, they talked. Arudo explained that his unkempt appearance often closed off many opportunities, including access to the delicious food available at this hotel. He believed Majika would enjoy it as well. While Arudo explained something to her in their room, Majika stared intently at him, and Arudo couldn't quite grasp why. Majika then dismissed his unspoken question, declaring she would take a bath. Arudo, seeing her begin to remove her cloak, quickly asked her to undress in the bathroom, not in front of him. At that moment, the slime happily settled onto the bed, clearly tired. Majika, standing in the bathroom, prepared to put on her clothes, noting this was a new experience for her. Stepping out of the shower, she decided she would go straight to bed and enjoy a hearty meal the next morning. Then, she noticed Arudo practicing magic, realizing the sheer mana radiating from him. Such a feat was impossible for an ordinary person. Watching him sit on the bed with closed eyes, Majika pondered who Arudo truly was. She had traveled the world tirelessly, seeking someone specific. Yet, a few days ago, this guy had conveniently joined her. As she observed him, she saw strength beyond his years and skills she had never encountered. She needed to get closer, to investigate further. It seemed he harbored a secret. Majika recalled everything Arudo had said, surprised by his mature demeanor and speech. Could he be the one she sought? The one destined to change this world? The star prediction foretold the hero would arrive in a girl's body, making it impossible for Arudo to be that hero. Still, as she gazed at him, Majika felt an undeniable premonition. Arudo would become the key to opening the doors of a new world, a feeling she had experienced before. The next moment, Arudo was fast asleep, sleep, utterly exhausted from his training. Magica, observing him, noted how he collapsed like a dead man once his mana reserves were depleted. Why does he push himself so hard with training? She wondered, a sense of unease stirring within her. It almost seemed as if someone were chasing him. Someone watched them from the rooftop. A moment later, an intruder attempted to climb through the open window. Magica was surprised, wondering if it was truly a thief. His presence was barely detectable, suggesting a very low level. She could have driven him away, but she wanted to observe how Arudo would handle the situation. So, Magica feigned sleep. As the thief entered the room, he reached for Arudo. Arudo, stirring, reached behind him, then awoke and calmly greeted the intruder before him. The thief responded by drawing a knife and attempting to attack Arudo. Magica immediately sprang from her bed, shouting for Arudo to be careful. The knife froze inches from Arudo's throat as the thief warned, "Don't move!" The thief then stated that if Arudo behaved like an adult, he wouldn't be harmed. Magica and Arudo both demanded to know what the thief wanted. "Did you really want money? How did you even know about this place?" Arudo pressed, leaving the thief speechless. Instead of talking, Arudo attacked the thief. He unleashed an air cannon, striking the intruder. The force of Arudo's blow sent the intruder sprawling out the window. Magica looked at Arudo and asked if he was all right. He replied that everything was in perfect order. Watching where the enemy fell, Magica realized Arudo had used incredibly complex magic with a seemingly simple movement. Such power could easily kill. Magica wondered how much Arudo must have trained to reach such a level at his age. She turned to Arudo to ask him, but he was already fast asleep again. Magica thought this boy was destined for fame in many ways. She noticed the thief's knife lying near Aruto's bed. Later, after waking, the two went down to the tavern and began to eat. As various dishes were brought to them, Aruto asked Magica if she found the food delicious and if she was enjoying it. With her mouth full, Magica declared it the most delicious food she had ever tasted, her words slightly garbled. Arudo simply told her to eat and not rush. Soon after, they thanked the staff for the meal. They then left the hotel, and Magica thanked Aruto, stating she was completely full. Aruto then teasingly promised Magica that by morning, she would have eaten enough for 10 people. Magica then inquired about their next move. Arudo explained that while he initially planned to visit the dungeon, yesterday's unexpected visitor had changed his mind. He now held the thief's knife, contemplating where else to search. Arudo proceeded to the guild, greeting those seated near the entrance. Again, two men watched him. One, the merchant who had bought Arudo's magic stones, recognized him, asking if he was indeed the young man from yesterday. Arudo in response asked, "Are you appraising magic stones today?" The man explained he was speaking with the boss and asked Arudo to return later if he had business. Arudo replied that this was fortunate timing. He also wished to speak with their superiors, adding, "Could it be that there's a thief in the guild?" The boss, gazing at Arudo, asked for clarification and further details. Arudo explained that a suspicious individual had entered their room the previous day. While they successfully scared him off, the intruder's target was clearly the money from the magic stones sold to the guild. The criminal hadn't rummaged through the room. He knew precisely where the funds were kept. Otherwise, he wouldn't have known to search in Arudo's bag. In other words, Arudo concluded, the robber could only be someone present in the guild during our transaction. Finishing his explanation, Arudo looked at his superiors. The boss acknowledged the high probability of Arudo's deduction. Turning to Lion, who sat directly opposite him, the boss stated that Lion was responsible and asked if he'd noticed anyone suspicious. Lion replied vaguely, "I wouldn't even know. Maybe, maybe not." The boss pressed him to speak more clearly. Arudo silently observed the exchange. Finally, Lion reported that he hadn't seen anyone suspicious. Arudo, pointing to Magica, revealed that she had, in fact, managed to brand the criminal during their encounter. Magica looked surprised by Arudo's words. Arudo then requested that if the boss noticed a man with a magic sign on his hand, he should be detained. At that moment, Lion subtly lowered his sleeves. Handing the dagger to the boss, Arudo mentioned the thief had also dropped it. While a fine weapon, it should be handed over to the gendarmes as evidence. True, it will assist them in the search for the thief, the boss replied, examining the dagger. Suddenly, Lion interjected, asking the boss if Arudo could keep the dagger. He argued that rules allowed victors to claim spoils from defeated opponents, and it seemed a shame to part with such a fine weapon. The boss began to agree, but before he could finish, Lion had already approached Arudo. He pressed the dagger into Arudo's hand, extolling its quality and urging him to guard it carefully, speculating it was quite valuable. Arudo tried to push Lion away, clearly displeased by the turn of events. The boss then insisted on calm transactions, stressing the need for reinforced security. Lion, claiming full understanding, asked the boss to rely on him. Afterward, Arudo and Magica departed. Magica then stated the person was a thief, questioning, was it wise to let him go? Arudo replied that the warnings had been given. The rest is no longer our concern. Magica then asked, was his real goal truly just to acquire a weapon? Arudo looked at Magica, a flicker of confusion. Had she seen right through him? He decided that with this task complete, their adventures truly began. Standing before the dungeon entrance, Arudo gazed up at its towering structure as he spoke. Magica, following his gaze, admitted she couldn't discern its peak. Arudo explained that this was a legendary labyrinth, one of the world's greatest dungeons, whose vastness, origin, and builders remained a mystery. Upon entering the portal, they found themselves instantly transported to a different location. Arudo clarified that the lower level spanned the 1st to the 25th floors. This section was relatively safe, primarily serving as a training ground for novice adventurers. As Arudo explained this, a distinct bellow caught his attention. Suddenly, two nearby adventurers warned that a monster had escaped from an upper floor. They shouted that his magic wouldn't be enough, urging Arudo to flee. Just then, a gigantic horned rat charged directly at Arudo. Others, seeing a mere child, frantically frantically yelled for him to run faster. Arudo, facing the charging enemy, uttered the word grave. Instantly, the creature plummeted into a gaping hole that appeared in the floor. Arudo realized he had miscalculated. He had overexerted his power and risked harming those around them. Magica peered down, astonished, along with everyone else who couldn't comprehend the sudden appearance of such a massive hole. While some suspected an earthquake, no tremors were felt. Arudo quickly claimed that the floor had simply collapsed, seemingly by ill chance. The chasm was deep enough that he yelled for everyone to be careful as they scattered. Magica asked, "Why didn't you say that was your doing?" Arudo replied that they wouldn't have believed him anyway. It was better to hasten to the upper floors. Starting from the 26th floor, the dungeon reached an intermediate difficulty level, where the true maze was said to begin. Moments later, Magica faced a bear. Arudo watched, impressed, as she defeated it with a single blow. Sitting beside the carcass, Magica brushed off the compliment, pointing out that Arudo had fought as well. Drawing the blade from his belt, Arudo decided it was time to test it. The system immediately reported a skill increase, dexterity plus 110. Arudo was thrilled by the boost, realizing the dagger was far more effective than he'd imagined. He mused that a proper skill board would show him his progress visually, rather than simply sensing it, and that this knife would be invaluable when choosing new equipment. Even with such a potent weapon, Arudo knew he couldn't afford to stop. He needed to grow stronger by facing the bears ahead. The monsters on this middle level weren't particularly challenging, so he resolved to seek out more formidable foes upon leaving. Arudo declared the upper level was their next destination, and after dispatching their current opponents, they departed. Magica simply observed the bears Arudo had slain. Arudo ventured into a cave, immediately plunging into battle. Demons surged toward him. Arudo was confident he could repel them. Soon, the demons were crushed beneath the very stones Arudo had weaponized. Watching them fall, he let out a relieved breath. "We're on the 50th floor," Arudo announced to Magica. "This is where the upper level begins, a high-risk zone where only a select few high-level adventurers can hope to compete. The strength of the monsters will increase with every floor, so we need to level up significantly while we're still here." He gazed ahead as he spoke. Magica simply watched Arudo, then turned to him, asking why he fought monsters in such a usual manner. Arudo was utterly surprised. Was there an unusual way? If she knew a better method, he eagerly asked her to teach him, his eyes sparkling. Magica clarified that she hadn't meant it that way, but rather that the monsters Arudo had just defeated were strong enough to trouble even high-level adventurers. Magica disliked how easily Arudo had dispatched several monsters at once. She couldn't fathom how he possessed such strength. Standing before him, she pressed him for answers. Arudo then countered by asking if she found his fighting style strange. Magica confirmed that it certainly appeared so from an outsider's perspective, wondering why he seemed so surprised by her observation. In that moment, Arudo realized Magica was the second person to truly perceive him. Before this, only Hannah had ever seen beyond his surface. He recalled his past life. Even at level 99, he fought monsters alone. While other high-level adventurers attracted followers, no one had ever even glanced his way, dismissed due to his low life stat. This was the harsh law of that world. Now, Arudo pondered, it seemed there were others besides Hannah who defied this very law. At that moment, Magica's curiosity piqued, asking if Arudo was, in fact, entirely human. Smiling, Arudo assured her he was 100% exactly human. He thought to himself that, despite his assertion, it was a hard truth to accept, given he had died and been reborn. Observing Arudo and repeating his words, Magica, amused by his smile, settled on the explanation that he was simply peculiar. Arudo bristled at her comment. Moments later, the system announced a level increase, and they continued their descent into the cave. Arudo declared he could now defeat monsters from the 50th floor and proposed they climb a little higher. Arudo's past life memories told him that a dangerous monster would be lurking here. As if on cue, a small ogre appeared before them. Arudo recalled how much effort it took to defeat this ogre in his past life, now curious about how swiftly he could do it. As they stood before the monster, Magica remarked on the ogre's impatient eagerness to kill, noting its far superior strength compared to previous monsters. Turning to Arudo, she offered to attack from the rear. Arudo refused, declaring he would fight the monster alone. Magica, upon hearing this, worried Arudo was not thinking clearly. A single mistake would mean his death. Arudo replied that he understood the risks, but saw this as a chance to gauge his true strength. Drawing his knife, he stepped forward to face the ogre. In the next moment, Arudo attacked, striking the ogre with his sword. He found the monster's skin astonishingly thick, like metal, yet he still managed to injure it. The ogre, enraged, retaliated, slashing Arudo's cheek. Dodging a subsequent blow, Arudo reasoned that his attacks were indeed effective. By continually dodging and hitting the same spot as he had been doing, he could eventually defeat the ogre. But as he landed after another strike, Magica exclaimed, "That couldn't just be!" Magica, however, couldn't help but wonder if Arudo had truly defeated this monster with such ease. Arudo, having dried himself off, mused that he hadn't needed to strain himself much. Perhaps this was the current limit of his strength. The slime then deposited a large diamond at his feet. As Arudo examined it, he wondered why a monster of this rank would drop such a significant gem. A sudden shift in the air signaled something new. At that moment, Arudo called out to Magica, asking if she heard it. The girl, standing just behind him, replied by asking what sound he was referring to. Realizing the danger, Arudo turned to Magica and urged her, "We need to get out of here, fast!" Magica countered that escape was impossible. Moving even an inch would mean their death. Just then, a colossal ogre emerged directly from the depths of the cave, its massive hand extending towards them. This green ogre was enshrouded in magical ivy, a low-level parasitic monster known to drain the power of higher-tier creatures it infects. Arudo, facing the ogre, pondered its presence on the 70th floor. Typical typical ogres only began to appear 10 floors higher. Arudo wasn't even fully confident he could defeat a smaller opponent, yet now a massive ogre stood before him. As he placed the slime back into the bag, he glanced at Magica, insisting they seize the opportunity to escape. Magica, however, flatly refused. She recognized the monster's immense power, but believed it had a limit. Activating her gloves, she prepared for battle. She had tirelessly trained to become a worthy partner for the hero she had sought, having long considered herself unrivaled. Yet, upon meeting Arudo, she finally understood her past efforts were insufficient. The girl then charged the ogre, resolute in her duty to secure victory, and launched her attack. After her strike, Magica saw her attack had barely any effect. The ogre only grew angrier and retaliated against her. Dodging the ogre's blows, Magica realized she was faster than it. A single attack would clearly be insufficient. She needed to unleash several simultaneously. Despite her swift, relentless attacks, the ogre struck her with ivy, then seized her, its grip painfully crushing her body. Arudo used an air blade, freeing the girl as the ivy fell away behind her. Arudo asked Magica how she felt. She thanked him, a sense of self-reproach washing over her for being saved by a child. Magica turned her gaze back to the ogre, reactivating her power. She knew it was time to unleash everything. Invoking light as an untouched shadow, she called upon the radiance of 1,000 heavenly bodies. Unleashing the artifact Star Rain, Magica attacked the ogre with all her might. Realizing she had expended all her mana on the secret spell, she believed the ogre should have perished. But as the dust dispersed, she saw the ogre standing unharmed, utterly bewildered. The ogre, at that moment, was raising its leg directly over Magica. Magica stared up at it, realizing that despite putting all her strength into the blow, it hadn't been enough. The ogre plummeted into the ground directly beneath it. Aruto moved swiftly to Magica. As she saw Arudo appear before her, he scooped her into his arms, telling her to leave the rest to him as he ran. He then turned to Slime, instructing it to look after Magica. The slime assented, and Arudo rejoined the battle. Standing before the ogre, Arudo knew he had to win. Arudo immediately rushed forward, knowing he was no faster than Magica, but considering it nonetheless. The ogre's attack abruptly shattered Arudo's train of thought. Witnessing this, Magica let out a desperate cry. Gasping for breath, Arudo instinctively countered the ogre's blow, aiming to retaliate. Arudo scrutinized his foe, acknowledging that despite its magical nature, the ivy remained vulnerable to fire. However, he knew merely burning the vines would be futile. They would only regenerate. Arudo needed to strike in a way that truly harmed the ogre. Gripping his sword, Arudo launched another assault. He understood that piercing the ogre's thick skin directly was impossible, so he had to aim for a precise weakness. With his target in mind, Arudo unleashed a fireball directly into the ogre's back. Arudo slumped to the ground, observing the impact of his attack. The next moment, Arudo's eyes darkened, and he fell to the ground. Magica could only stare at the ogre in shock, amazed as she realized Arudo had won. But Arudo was just a child, yet he had defeated this ogre. These were Magica's last thoughts before she fell unconscious. Opening their eyes, Arudo and Magica found a slime hovering directly above them. The sun was shining as they lay on the ground, wondering how they had gotten there. Arudo questioned if Rue, the slime, had truly rescued them, to which Rue affirmed it with a unique tongue sound. Hugging the slime, Arudo thanked her, calling her the most reliable companion in the world. Turning to Magica, Arudo pointed out the danger of remaining unconscious there. It was fortunate they had recovered where they were. Magica remained silent, then apologized and declared she would return to the hotel first. Arudo agreed, stating he would also take a break before returning. Arudo stared at Magica, greatly surprised. Could Magica really use an artifact? Artifacts were holy tools created by God, their number so few in their world that they could be counted on one's fingers. The artifact Magica used was called Star Rain. Arudo recalled that if his memories from his past life served him correctly, the owner of this artifact would die in 7 years. It was night. Arudo, sitting in the bathtub, realized Magica had possessed an artifact's magic all this time. The artifact, known as the Hand of Justice, designated its wielder as a person possessing 2 specific traits, classified by the Vatican as criminal element number 5, Machia ex terra. She and 5 other people were declared enemies of God. While this declaration had not yet occurred, an order for their destruction would be given in the future. Arudo requested the skill scoreboard, and a system interface appeared before him. Looking at it, Arudo surmised that Magica's life indicator was likely 4. In the dungeon, Arudo had felt her magical energy surpass his own, coupled with an indestructible barrier. She must be incomparably stronger than him, Arudo mused, a clear disparity in their respective standards of living. Arudo then thought, but even she will be ruined by the Vatican in 7 years. As he sank underwater, Arudo began to grasp the extent of his weakness compared to her. Could he truly change his fate? Arudo wondered sadly. At that moment, Slime appeared before Arudo, who, surprised, surfaced from his bath. He asked what she was already doing there, wondering if she too wanted a bath. The slime responded in its own language, prompting Arudo to get out and begin washing her. Arudo, rubbing Rue with a washcloth, remarked, "This time, we only escaped thanks to you." He promised to rub her until she shone, a gesture that delighted the slime. As Arudo rubbed the slime, she replied in her unique language. Arudo couldn't tell if he should stop, as the slime's heels seemed ticklish, a perplexing thought, as he never imagined a slime would have heels. The next moment, the slime, sparkling so intensely it almost blinded him, prompted Arudo to ask if she always looked this way when clean. Smiling, Arudo looked at Rue and asked if she was happy. Rue jumped with happiness and said something to Arudo. The next moment, she blurred, resembling a puddle. Seeing this, Arudo asked if she shouldn't be washed, then gently pushed the slime back into the water. After leaving the monopool and and bringing the slime back to his room, Arudo realized he had startled it. Just then, Magica appeared. Rising from the sofa, she greeted, "Hello, Aruto." Magica seemed to have something to say, so Arudo decided they should talk outside. As Arudo brought her a drink, he realized she hadn't uttered a word since they returned to the hotel. Had something truly happened? Handing her the drink, Arudo remarked, "The sunset here is beautiful." They both gazed at the sky. Magica quietly agreed. Clutching her mug, she sat solemnly before turning to Aruto. She confessed, "I always thought I'd never lose to a magician." She had been so confident no one could match her skill. "Perhaps my training made me too arrogant," she admitted, "but now I realize I was weak. From now on, I want to devote myself to solitary training," Magica declared, looking at Arudo. Magica explained that living alongside Aruto would only aggravate her weakness, so she wanted a separate room. Looking at Arudo, she added, "If I hadn't come with you, I would never have realized this," then thanked him. She vowed, "Next time, I definitely won't lose to you." Turning to Arudo once more, she challenged, "At our next meeting, I'll try to become stronger than you." Hearing this, Arudo's hands trembled and he began to laugh, baffling Magica as to why he found it so amusing. Arudo explained that she was saying very strange things. Then, he apologized, realizing it wasn't about talent. It was the most important thing was to try hard. Clinking mugs, Arudo declared he wasn't going to lose either, and they should meet again when each of them had grown 100 times stronger. They laughed, rejoicing in their current progress, never imagining that despite their efforts, a power existed in this world that could destroy them in a blink. Back at the hotel, Arudo began to gather his belongings. Checking his bag, he confirmed he had packed everything. He glanced at the bed where Magica had slept, then closed his eyes. Leaving the room, he resolved to keep the promise he made to her. From that moment, he lost all track of time, throwing himself entirely into training. First, Arudo decided he needed to develop his crafting skill. Consulting his system, he arrived at a forest, realizing it was a prime training spot. It boasted an abundance of collectible crystals and was rich in mana. A crafting skill, Arudo mused. He began training by generating mana and breaking stones into pieces. Soon, he received a skill increase and gained control over magic. He dedicated himself to mining stones. Soon after, his crafting skill reached level 20, unlocking blacksmith. As Arudo anticipated, crafting provided not only offensive abilities like Grave Reaper, but also the power to create items. Utilizing materials from the dungeon like fire and magic, naturally, he no longer had to worry about being chased from the forge. Holding a sword before him, Arudo realized that by training solely with it, he had suddenly acquired a new skill. Moments later, while fighting a powerful monster in a cave, Arudo understood it was too early for him to advance to the next floor. Soon after, the system reported Arudo had acquired the skill Art of the Blade and surpassed level 40. A new skill, Two-Handed Style, unlocked. Seeing this, Arudo drew his sword and wielded it against his opponent. After the battle, his level immediately increased. Arudo realized that by using Grave Reaper, Typhoon, and other attacks, the Grave Reaper's level rose. He combined it with magic, gaining not only control over the created fissures, but also high lethal potential. Throughout this period, Arudo's level rose in tandem with his skills. The system reported Arudo's level was now 40, and all his skills had increased by 30 units. His crafting skill and manipulation were now available. Intrigued, Arudo opened the system window. It described manipulation as absorbing a portion of mana to move an object in a desired direction. Arudo pointed his hand at a stone and activated manipulation. The stone shifted to the side. Though not as flashy as Grave Reaper, Arudo believed this skill would also prove useful. He continued to develop the skill. Thus, days turned into weeks. Soon, winter arrived. Walking through the city, Arudo overheard the townspeople's chatter. He heard something entertaining. Two men were discussing a rumor. "Have you heard about the weirdo who recently appeared on the upper floors of the dungeon? He single-handedly defeated 1,000 monsters." The second man admitted he had heard the tales, adding that the weirdo was just a child, and for some reason, he carried a low-level slime everywhere. As Arudo passed them, he realized they were speaking of him. When they saw him, they couldn't believe their eyes. After all, high-level adventurers usually hunted the upper floors in groups. Arudo silently observed them, realizing his presence was finally being noticed. Before, his low profile meant he went unnoticed, no matter what he achieved. But perhaps something had changed. Though he certainly didn't appreciate being called a weirdo, Arudo mused, glancing at the strangers. Later, at the hotel, Arudo informed the owner that he would be heading back to the dungeon tomorrow and wished to vacate his room for 2 or 3 days. The owner cautioned Arudo to be careful, then casually asked if the girl who was previously with him was all right. Hearing the question, Arudo realized he hadn't seen Magica since they rented separate rooms. The owner then mentioned that the girl hadn't returned for several days, which was starting to worry her. Upon hearing this, Arudo clutched his jacket, initially thinking, "It's Magica, there's nothing to worry about," but a prickle of discomfort still ran through him. Just then, a knight on horseback rode into the city. Everyone who saw him remarked that the Vatican had summoned its knight, finding it quite impressive. Arudo heard this, bolted from the hotel, and the owner called out, asking what was wrong. Arudo didn't answer, his mind racing with how the future he remembered was now at odds with reality. Then he understood, everything was was right. His changes had also affected Magica, but why hadn't he considered that? Arudo's thoughts spiraled. Had the Vatican already ordered Magica's destruction? What if the future where she was executed would arrive now? Arudo could only think and pray that Magica was all right. As he ran past a carriage, someone within watched Arudo from the window, musing, "What a clever boy he is." Approaching the dungeon, Arudo desperately hoped Magica was safe. He activated his sense of presence, reasoning that someone as powerful as her should be easy to locate, and he prayed he wasn't wrong. Spotting a familiar figure, he called out. Magica turned, recognizing Arudo immediately. "It's been a long time," she remarked. "How are you doing?" Acknowledging her strength, and concluding his worries were likely unfounded. Catching his breath, Arudo assured her he was fine, prompting Magica to ask why he was breathing so heavily. Unable to admit his panicked fears for her safety, Arudo feigned a casual jog. He claimed he was merely out for a run, saw her, and stopped to say hello before pretending to continue. Then, removing his scarf, he noted how chilly it was, especially for her attire. He wrapped the scarf around her, urging her to wear it so she wouldn't catch a cold. Magica gratefully accepted. Just then, something in the sky drew their gaze. They both looked up, baffled by the sight. Arudo described it as a black mass, and Magica admitted it made her profoundly uneasy. The ominous mass began to expand, its oppressive aura palpable. Arudo instantly recognized the looming danger and urged Magica to evacuate the nearby citizens. Moments later, the black mass began to crack. Arudo closed his eyes in disbelief. It was a demon standing directly before them, a creature known to control high-ranking monsters. He questioned why it would appear in the heart of the city. The demon immediately began to devastate nearby houses. It was a creature that wouldn't stop attacking until everything around it was reduced to ash. Nothing would deter it. Yet Arudo found himself paralyzed, just as he had been during the fire. The insurmountable difference in their life levels rendered his body numb, his will powerless against the inexorable laws of this world. Despite this, Arudo strained his limbs, desperate to move, knowing the city would be annihilated if he remained frozen. Suddenly, Magica placed the scarf Arudo had given her back onto him. "Everything will be fine," she declared. "Aruto, you can rely on me." Leaping into action, she charged directly at the demon. Aruto watched intently, struck by Magica's incredible strength. She had grown so much more powerful. As she attacked the demon, she managed to land a blow, but it instantly regenerated. Magica realized that as a demon, he would require a single, overwhelming strike. She prepared to use her artifact, Star Rain, but the demon moved with blinding speed, appearing behind her in an instant. Magica spun around, acknowledging his swiftness, and dodged his subsequent attack. She realized the demon left no opening for her to utilize the artifact. A moment later, Arudo saw only shattered pavement, his thoughts consumed by Magica. He couldn't comprehend why he was merely a spectator, why his last 8 years had been so utterly wasted. He hadn't been reborn just to witness another catastrophe, a repeat of his past life's collapse. His sheer desire ignited mana within his hands. Staring at the shimmering energy, Arudo wondered if he could manifest magic from his current paralyzed state. If only he could succeed. He looked toward Magica. The demon pressed its attack, and she struggled against the added difficulty of the strong winds. One direct hit, and she would die, she knew. With the demon regenerating after each strike, she needed to seize the perfect moment to deploy her artifact. Magica attacked the demon once more, only to be violently thrown back. This was simply unrealistic, she thought. Even if Arudo was now accumulating mana, he wouldn't be able to intervene in time. The demon conjured a massive fireball, spinning it overhead. Magica looked at it, understanding her death was imminent. She closed her eyes, bracing for the end. At that moment, Arudo used his manipulation skill. Magica opened her eyes to see the demon's fire attack being carried far away. Arudo stared at the redirected attack, disbelieving. Magica wondered if he had truly altered the attack's trajectory. Just then, the demon lost its balance. Magica looked at Arudo, realizing he was a young man. As the demon fell right on Magica, she saw her chance to attack. Arudo shouted to her, "Use Star Rain!" She attacked the demon, wounding it until it disappeared. Witnessing its disappearance, Arudo and Magica both believed they had succeeded. Magica ran up to Arudo, asking if he was okay. Helping him up, Arudo explained he was just weak from the level up and that a short rest would restore his strength. As she put Arudo on her back, he didn't understand what Magica was doing. She insisted on taking him to the hotel. Arudo asked her not to, but she countered that he had already done so much for her and pleaded to be allowed to do at least this. Later, as they fled, Magica mentioned she had never seen a technique like his before. Realizing Magica referred to his manipulation skill, Arudo explained he had acquired it since their last encounter. He demonstrated by manipulating his scarf, making it instantly appear on Magica. Magica, seeing this, asked if he had done that. Arudo replied that he could move objects at will using mana. Thus, he could change the direction of wind attacks, block and redirect offenses, and with training, one could control opponents like puppets. Magica declared it an incredible skill. Arudo, however, explained that he couldn't move while using it and would never have defeated the demon alone. He then credited Magica with saving the city, addressing her directly. Blushing, Magica said she thought they both tried. Arudo chuckled in response. A thought struck Arudo as he recalled the demon's last defeat. If these incidents continued, the city would be obliterated. He realized he didn't recall hearing about such an event before, which meant someone must have defeated it. Who could be strong enough to defeat such a demon? Arudo pondered. Just then, he sensed an aura and asked Magica to stop as they ran across the rooftop. Magica, turning to Arudo, said they hadn't reached their destination yet, but Arudo insisted they stop now. Suddenly, Magica stopped, halting mid-stride on the roof. Arudo looked down and immediately recognized the figure. His black clothes, the oppressive mana radiating from him, as if he wasn't from this world. This This was the magician who had killed Hannah in a previous life. The man standing directly before Arudo was Gamagan, who stood there looking away. Magica looked at Arudo, noticing he looked disturbed, a look she'd never seen before. She asked who the man was. Arudo replied that it was Gamagan Salzway, one of the 12 commanders of Euphonia. Hearing this, Magica thought that even she had heard of him, for Gamagan was known as the strongest magician in the world. As she pondered this, Arudo began to gather his magic, prompting Magica to ask what he was doing. In a fit of anger, Arudo stated it didn't concern her, for he had to kill this magician. Magica stopped Arudo, asking if he truly intended to fight in such a state. Arudo was already looking at Magica, who grabbed his hand and told him he was too weak after his level up and would be no match for this magician. Arudo only asked her to let go. Magica, in turn, urged Arudo to calm down and sit. Didn't he understand? He couldn't win now, she shouted, trying to reason with him. Arudo calmed down, realizing Magica was right. In his current state, he couldn't defeat the magician. Leaning on the rooftop, Arudo felt a wave of depression. Meanwhile, the magician stood observing his invention. A man beside him then asked what it meant that he had summoned the demon, and if he, Mr. Gamagan, was indeed responsible. Gamagan replied that it was true. He had acquired a rare summoning artifact and simply wanted to test it, but it proved useless. The artifact could only summon a low-ranking ogre. Breaking the artifact in his hands, he stated, "Unfortunately, before I had a chance to intervene, someone had already defeated it without difficulty." The man behind the magician pointed out that the strength of even such a weak demon was enough to destroy a small state. The 12 commanders of Euphonia obey only royal orders. Their duty is to protect the country. Such an act is simply unacceptable. At this moment, Gamagan looked at the man, lifted him, and bound his neck with magic. Gamagan asked the suspended man why he felt the need to voice his opinions on such matters. Surely he hadn't considered it might be in his best interest to keep his opinions to himself. Gasping for air, the man apologized profusely. The young man plummeted to the ground. The magician then ordered his carriage, declaring his intent to return to the capital and continue his research. At that moment, a subordinate addressed Gamagan, asking if he still hadn't found the one he sought and if he truly intended to leave things as they were. Gamagan replied that the person wasn't in the city. As he entered his carriage, he mused that upon seeing Aruto and Magica, he believed Makia would unleash terror. He hadn't expected to find one of the Vatican's enemies in such a place. Arudo and Magica were struck with horror by the man's gaze. The magician, meanwhile, speculated that Makia must have been the one who defeated the demon, deeming her strong. He envisioned acquiring wonderful ingredients from her body parts. Gamagan considered what he could do with the girl then, but halted his thoughts, realizing no orders for her destruction had yet been given. Going against the king would jeopardize support for his experiments, a risk too great to take, the magician concluded. Thus, he instructed his coachman to depart, confident they would encounter the girl again. As the magician's carriage departed, Arudo and Magica watched it go, realizing how deeply the magician's stare had unsettled them. Magica voiced her fear that he would surely kill them. She then recalled he was a commander from Euphonia, and looking at Arudo, asked how he was. Arudo gazed at the floor, musing on his own foolishness for ever believing he could fight such a monstrous magician. Vowing to himself, he resolved to be stronger than Gamagan when they next met. A few days later, the Lord of Kinetagris expressed a desire to publicly thank Magica for exorcising the demon. Magica refused, however, asking if they had forgotten about Arudo. The officials, however, were unwilling to acknowledge that someone of Arudo's low social standing could possess such power. After that, the Lord seemed to give up. As they walked through the city, Arudo questioned Magica, asking if she truly didn't want the recognition. Was she certain? They discussed this. Magica, confident in her stance, expressed her frustration that no one wanted to acknowledge Arudo's power. Arudo replied that nothing could be done, as in their world, everything was decided by one standard of living. Smiling and looking at Magica, he silently reflected that only she and Hannah seemed to ignore this societal rule. He then advised Magica that rather than worrying, she should devote herself to training. Magica, hearing Arudo speak with such conviction, wondered if everything was truly all right with him. Arudo mentioned he was thinking of dropping into the dungeon again tomorrow. At that moment, they passed by a man who was watching them carefully. Arudo stopped and turned to him. Magica asked what had caught his attention. He replied that the man's face seemed familiar. Arudo saw the same man who worked in the guild, now sitting on the asphalt. It was Lion, holding a sign that read, "Needed, warmth and affection." Lion, seeing Arudo, a guild employee, was surprised and immediately recognized him. He shouted, "It's you, don't you remember me?" Arudo, clearly showing his dislike for Lion, claimed he had never seen him before. Lion, of course, didn't believe Arudo, stating his face was unforgettable. He explained his dire situation, hinting that financial support would be greatly appreciated. Aruto and Magica simply walked past. Arudo, turning to Magica, inquired about the dungeon floor she was training on, deliberately ignoring Lion. Suddenly, Lion threw himself at Arudo's feet, pleading for money. Exasperated, Arudo tried to shake him off, demanding to know why he was so persistent, and if he had no shame begging strangers for money. Undeterred, Lion addressed Arudo and Magica, declaring his belief in their potential. They remained silent, simply staring at him. Lion, pointing to himself, then proposed they form an adventuring party. He offered a fresh start, formally introducing himself as Lion to Aruto and Magica. As an adventurer himself, he proposed they work together. Another pair of hands always comes in handy in battle. Besides, he added, asking them not to be surprised, I'm a hero. It's a mega rare profession! Arudo, smiling thinly, told Lion he didn't agree with the proposal. Lion couldn't understand Arudo's objection. Arudo mused that while a hero was rare, he doubted Lion would be useful. Magica yawned behind Arudo, as Lion, still kneeling, pleaded for Arudo to reconsider. I even left the guild specifically for this, Lion said. Arudo, hearing this, retorted, more likely you were caught red-handed and kicked out. Lion gaped, unable to comprehend how Arudo had seen through him so easily, then realized he had undeniably messed up. Arudo sighed, explaining that this exact reason was why he preferred earning money by hunting in dungeons. Suddenly, Lion was practically jumping on Arudo, again begging to be taken into their party. Magica finally lost her patience. She handed Lion half a loaf of bread and told him he was getting on everyone's nerves. Lion dropped to the ground, slumping behind them as Arudo and Magica walked away, conversing quietly. Magica informed Arudo that she was hungry. Arudo replied that he had recently discovered a good place and offered to take her there. A few days later, deep in a dungeon, Arudo battled numerous foes. After defeating them, his level rose to 42, and his passive blade skill increased to 43. He noted that the blade he had forged was proving to be exceptionally good. Even after several more days, Lion hadn't stopped chasing Arudo. Arudo, however, was already considering ascending to a higher floor. Suddenly, Arudo heard frantic shouts and the sound of running. Lion burst into view, pursued by a pack of wolves, screaming for help. Arudo was utterly surprised to see Lion there. Lion immediately begged Arudo to get rid of the pursuing wolves. Arudo then used his magic, telling Lion to duck before unleashing a burst of flame upon the attacking wolves. Witnessing the display, Lion exclaimed, "That was incredibly cool!" Arudo rushed over to Lion, who was already on his knees, profusely thanking Arudo for the rescue. Lion explained he had been following Arudo and inadvertently found himself on the upper levels. Arudo chastised him. "Beginners have no place here." Lion reiterated his desire to form a team with Arudo and Magica. Arudo, exasperated, demanded to know how many more times he had to repeat that Lion would only get in the way. Arudo stated he didn't have time to mess with him. Still on his knees, Lion quietly apologized to Arudo. Arudo, turning away, told him if he understood, he should have returned sooner. Just then, a wolf lunged at Lion. Arudo, seeing this, swiftly attacked the wolf directly in front of him, then turned to the wounded Lion asking if he was alive. Arudo, kneeling beside him, found himself unable to believe what he saw. He was plagued by the thought that this was Arudo's fault. If Arudo had accepted Lion, he mused, this wouldn't have happened, as Lion lay wounded on the ground. As soon as Lion heard Arudo's words, he instantly sprang up, asking if it was true that Arudo might accept him. A startled Arudo, still asking if Lion was alive, watched as Lion rubbed his neck and casually admitted he hadn't mentioned it, but he was a vampire. Arudo was utterly stunned by this revelation. Vampires, a race often said to possess immortality, are known to hunt under the cover of night. Humans fear them as much as any monster, but Arudo, pointing at Lion, asked if these claims were true. Lion replied that vampires were not so different from humans, explaining that the horror stories were human fabrications. Their bodies, he clarified, were similar to human ones, though serious wounds could be just as fatal. Lion then explained to Arudo that he was special and invulnerable. Hearing this, Arudo wondered if this invulnerability meant he possessed the ability to regenerate. Arudo then asked how Lion sustained his injury. Lion replied it was a long story, adding that he also possessed high pain resistance. Arudo pressed him to tell the story and inquired if such an ability could be acquired. Lion explained that no one, regardless of race, could simply earn this ability, nor did he acquire it through his own efforts. He added that if he told Arudo, he wouldn't believe him. Lion then revealed he wasn't from this world. Arudo was astonished. Lion explained that he once lived in another world, Japan, as an ordinary person. He died in an accident but was reborn in euphony. During his final moments, a terrifying fear consumed him. Lion desperately prayed not to die, only to awaken in a new world, inhabiting a body that knew no fear of death. Hearing Lion's story, Arudo mused that others must have experienced similar rebirths. Lion then clarified that his pain resistance hadn't appeared immediately. He gained this ability in the early years of his new life. At first, this new world seemed a dream come true. A vampire race, a body immune to the fear of death, and even the profession of a hero. Lion felt like the protagonist of some grand tale. However, that feeling evaporated a few years later. A vampire hunt began in Fortinia, driven by the teachings of the church, and Lion witnessed his parents' brutal murder. As he couldn't be killed, they seized him and brought him to the church as a heretic. There, in the name of divine justice, endless commenced. Lion's body wouldn't die, yet he felt every ounce of pain. The daily suffering made him long for death as his greatest salvation. Despite his agony, he remained alive. 50 years later, his pain threshold finally shattered. He could no longer feel a single drop of pain. Lion recalled this as he stood upon a blazing bonfire. Seizing that moment, Lion made his escape. He ran for centuries, constantly hiding his true identity. Eventually, he arrived in Kinetogris and found work in the guild. After recounting his dramatic, movie-like tale, Lion stood before Arudo and told him that he would not be able to acquire the same skill. Listening to the horrific story, Arudo could barely believe the immense suffering Lion had endured. He apologized for making him relive such painful memories. Lion smiled and reassured Arudo not to dwell on it, stating those days were long past. Still, Lion confessed to one lingering regret. If only he had been strong enough, he could have protected his family. That was his sole lament. Arudo recalled memories from his past life. Lion explained that he joined the guild not only to earn money, but also to grow stronger. He asked Arudo again if he would form a team with him, but Arudo simply turned away and left. Lion observed Arudo, silently deeming him useless. Arudo Arudo then challenged Lion, asking how long he planned to stand there. He urged Lion to join him soon, questioning if he feared the intensity of Arudo's training. Lion beamed with joy upon hearing about the training, declaring his delight. Arudo, watching Lion play with slime, realized that while he couldn't fully grasp the hardships of an immortal life, the fundamental desire to protect loved ones resonated deeply with him, and he couldn't simply abandon someone like Lion. Thus began their training. Arudo resumed battling opponents, honing his skills with the power of the Grave Reaper. Soon after, enemies Arudo had previously fought attacked Lion nearby, and Lion cried out for his teacher's help. Arudo realized the sheer number of opponents, and that Lion needed to stop fighting like a mere human. As Arudo decimated monsters, Lion shielded his head from the chaotic attacks. Arudo advised Lion that while thinking through attacks was important, as a vampire with superior strength, he first needed to unleash his full power without hesitation. Arudo handed Lion a sword, and Lion, agreeing with Arudo, immediately engaged the opponents. After striking them down, Lion turned to Arudo, acknowledging him as his teacher and admitting Arudo was right. It was then that Arudo witnessed Lion's true strength. As Lion swung his sword, Arudo inquired about his strength and standard of living. Lion replied, stating his level was 4. Arudo realized this level matched Magica's. From then on, Arudo's sole focus was training Lion. They continued to improve their skills. Lion's level, or life, increased at a terrifying pace. Initially, he fought somewhat clumsily, but quickly surpassed Arudo. They tackled dungeons at a speed Arudo had never imagined possible. Every 10 floors, Magica joined them to defeat the area boss. Floors flew by quickly. Upon defeating a particularly formidable monster, Lion confidently told his teacher that their dungeon clear time would be legendary. Magica had never imagined they would one day defeat the 90th floor boss. 6 years later, Arudo stood over the fallen boss. He turned to Magica and Lion, thanking them for their unwavering support. His goal was the 100th floor, but time was rapidly running out. He declared that from this moment, the game would shift to an entirely new level. Hannah's death was now only a year away. Shortly after, Arudo gathered his belongings and departed the guild. The owners then inquired if Arudo was truly departing. Arudo confirmed his departure and thanked her for her hospitality. The girl then asked where Arudo planned to go, admitting she would feel lonely without him. Arudo revealed his intention to attend a particular school in Euphonia's capital. Just then, Magica and Lion rushed down the stairs towards Arudo. Lion, addressing Arudo, questioned if he was truly departing the city. Magica, standing beside Arudo, expressed her surprise, having heard nothing of his plans until now. Arudo intended to leave alone. Arudo then looked at his friends, who immediately questioned why he hadn't told them anything. Arudo simply replied that he had intended to say his goodbyes. Arudo reflected that Hannah's death was now only a year away. His full focus had to be on protecting her. A confrontation with Gamagan was inevitable. This battle might demand his life, and he refused to endanger any innocent people. Observing Arudo, Wyon remarked that he likely had his own reasons. Stepping forward, Magica declared she would accompany him, explaining that she still hadn't repaid Arudo for all he'd done for her 6 years prior. She added that Magica wouldn't permit Arudo to escape when he had come so far. Wyon, embracing Arudo, affirmed that he would of course join them, stating that students always follow in their teacher's footsteps. For these past 6 years, no young man had become stronger. Magica then added that should anything happen, they would come to Arudo's rescue. Arudo, surprised at first, then laughed, realizing he had no choice but to offer for them all to go together. With that, they boarded the carriage and set off. As they traveled through the mountains, Wyon sat in the carriage, yawning and gazing ahead, complaining of boredom. They had been driving for 4 days, he wondered, and where were they even headed? Arudo replied that once they descended the mountain, Wyon would see everything for himself. If he had nothing else to do, he could join Arudo. Arudo was speaking about his training, specifically concentrating mana. At that moment, Magica sat beside him, observing Arudo. Upon hearing Arudo's offer, Wyon declined, thanking him and remarking that only Arudo could train effectively just by sitting still. Magica then asked Arudo what their plan was upon arriving in Euphonia. Arudo revealed his intention to enroll in school, specifically mentioning the Royal Courts Institution as one of the country's finest and most exclusive. Wyon, surprised by this news, questioned Arudo's seriousness about studying and its necessity. Arudo, however, remained silent. Suddenly, the carriage jolted, nearly throwing Wyon out with a shout. Arudo and Magica exchanged surprised glances, observing their coachman, who then announced that a wheel had become stuck in a rut. He would attempt to free it, but warned they might not be able to continue. Magica turned to Arudo, asking what they should do. Arudo buried his face in his hands. Standing up, he looked at Magica and stated there was no other option. They would have to walk. Wyon interjected, assuring Arudo that wouldn't be necessary and that Arudo should rely on him instead. Moments later, the driver questioned if Arudo could pull out the wheel. Wyon, unfurling his belt, dismissed the idea. He declared the driver's help was no longer needed, instructing him to leave the cart and return with the horse alone. Without hesitation, Wyon lifted the entire massive section of land on which the cart rested and began running with it through the mountains. He imagined this unconventional transport to be more heroic, yet he was also eager to cover ground quickly. Placing the cart back on the ground, Wyon turned to the teacher, asking if his efforts were satisfactory. The teacher, looking inside, saw Magica and Arudo sprawled atop each other, and she remarked that such immense force should have been accounted for. Arudo, clearly annoyed, called Wyon over, threatening to leave him behind next time if he pulled a stunt like that again. Wyon sat nursing a bump on his head. He mused that Arudo would surely appreciate their faster pace, glancing back at the path they'd covered, confident they had indeed saved considerable time. Soon, the capital of Euphonia stretched before them. Arudo instructed Magica and Wyon to handle handle the luggage while he forged ahead. Leaping out, Arudo sprinted towards the city gates. As Arudo ran, his thoughts fixated on Hannah. She was here so close, his dear, unique Hannah. He reflected on their shared past, which compelled him toward the royal school. Even if they weren't destined to be lovers again in this life, he yearned to see her now. Meanwhile, Hannah stood in the middle of a street. A woman beside her asked why she seemed so startled. Hannah explained that her heart had suddenly begun to pound, a sensation akin to the long-sought person being incredibly near. She had never felt anything like it before. The woman responded, "Who knows? Perhaps the person destiny intends for you is somewhere close by." Intrigued by the idea of a fated person, Hannah asked who he might be. The woman admitted she couldn't know, but assured Hannah not to worry. The moment she met him, everything would become clear. Hannah questioned how she would recognize someone she didn't know at all, but such were the arrangements of human destiny. At that very moment, Arudo emerged from a tunnel into the city, standing incredibly close to her. Lion and Magica also entered the city. Lion surveyed the city, remarking on how it resembled a capital, a city fit for Arudo. Arudo, whom they had just caught up with, inquired what Lion meant. Lion then explained that in his world, such grand cities always offered work for heroes. Arudo was momentarily speechless, but explained that this city, the heart of the kingdom, housed 3 million people. Pointing towards the castle, Arudo directed Lion's gaze towards the royal castle, pointing out the surrounding administrative bodies. Residences of the highest aristocracy lined the streets, and an imposing state church of Fortimus stood opposite the castle. He emphasized the need for discretion, given the city's influential residents. Moments later, Lion spotted Fortimus within the church and declared his strong aversion to approaching her. After checking into a hotel, Arudo inquired what Magica and Lion planned to do, as he intended to begin preparing for the royal school's entrance exams. Lion expressed surprise at the existence of an entrance exam. Arudo clarified that it was only natural, given the school's reputation as the best in the country. The city boasted a guild and a dungeon, albeit smaller than those in Kinetogris. Arudo mused that finding adventures shouldn't be an issue for them. Arudo informed them he'd shared his lodging details, urging them to call if they needed anything. Lion confirmed everything was fine. After exchanging glances with Magica, they left Arudo alone. As Arudo approached the royal court school for its admission campaign, he considered the sheer number of applicants. This year, 10,000 hopefuls vied for just 100 spots. Finding Hannah among such a crowd felt like searching for a needle in a haystack, Arudo mused, deciding to look around inside while he had the chance. He soon passed a bench that caught his eye, triggering a memory from his past life. It was a spot he and Hannah frequently shared. 70 years had passed, Arudo realized, and he resolved that if he succeeded, he would surely find her. Suddenly, something caught Arudo's eye. He saw Lion pleading with an admissions committee member, asking if she could turn a blind eye. The girl, however, explained that she couldn't. Arudo then questioned Lion and Magica about their presence. Lion spotted Arudo and turned to the teacher. Magica claimed they were there to test their strength and take the exam. Lion immediately countered, revealing she wasn't truthful. Magica's real goal was simply to get Arudo into the school. Magica promptly struck Lion, ordering him to be silent. From the ground, Lion demanded to know why Magica was hitting him so hard. Standing, she retorted that if she had used all her strength, Arudo wouldn't have been able to get up at all. An admissions committee member then addressed Arudo, asking about the exam fee. Hearing this, Arudo looked genuinely surprised by the requirement. Lion, still on the ground, explained they lacked sufficient funds and had attempted to negotiate. Arudo immediately asked, "What happened to the money you'd accumulated?" Magica revealed Lion had disappointed them, spending all their savings on expensive food while they were touring the elite district. Arudo began to admonish them for their actions in his absence, but a new voice interrupted, declaring the students this year to be exceptionally noisy. Suddenly, a gust of wind magic enveloped the group, leaving them disoriented. A man materialized before them, proclaiming the school to be a place of rich history and noble traditions, not for uncivilized provincials. Arudo recognized Deutsch. Lion boldly challenged, "Who is this anyway?" He continued, pointing out the hypocrisy. The man who called them uncivilized provincials had just thrown magic at them. "If he's looking for a fight," Lion declared, clenching his fist, already poised. Arudo quickly intervened, urging Lion to calm down. This was a school professor, and causing trouble would negatively impact their exam results. Arudo privately reflected on Deutsch's character. He had always been fixated on a student's social status and living standards. The professor then inquired about their origins, noting their non-noble appearance, but then seeing Arudo, he directly addressed him. "Are you truly planning to take our exam with only a first level of life?" Arudo gazed back, surprised by the direct confrontation. Deutsch dismissed the matter, telling Arudo he should simply return home. His chances of passing were 0, and he'd only pay the entrance fee in vain. Glancing at Magica and Lion, Deutsch added that he didn't believe Arudo's companions stood a chance either. Arudo, however, silently concluded that Deutsch had left him no choice, mentally thanking him for his concern. Placing a bag of money down to cover the entrance fee, Arudo then declared he would indeed enroll and prove himself, not with words, but with his exam results. He firmly believed that this school, despite Deutsch's prejudices, was staffed by those who judged students solely on their merits. Arudo turned and left. Deutsch watched the departing trio. Arudo's arrogance, he mused, was astounding. Arudo, with only a first level of life, truly believed himself to be something extraordinary. If so, Deutsch decided, he genuinely wanted to witness what Arudo was truly capable of. With that thought, he also departed in the opposite direction. The exam consisted of 2 stages, a written test before lunch and a practical one afterward. Students first gathered in the classroom for the written portion. Arudo's task involved calculating departure times for 3 detachments, a mounted one at 10 km/h, a foot detachment at 4 km/h, and an equipment detachment at 2 km/h, ensuring all All three arrived simultaneously at a destination 30 kilometers away. Arudo, working through the problem, glanced at Lion, wondering if he was all right as the young man visibly struggled. He then observed Magica, who seemed to be handling it with ease, clearly a result of her diligent preparation. Arudo realized he couldn't afford to relax either. Moments later, Deutsch appeared directly in front of Arudo, contemplating the futility of a mere level 1 trying to pass. He mused that written results alone wouldn't suffice, and there would be no leniency in the practical portion, which he himself would oversee. Tapping his cane on the floor, Deutsch announced it was time to begin the practical exam. He addressed the students, explaining their task was to destroy the cube positioned before him. Deutsch warned them they could use any methods, but it would be far from easy. From the podium, our heroes watched the unfolding events intently. Following Deutsch's instruction, students took turns attempting to break the cube, each failing to make any progress. Despite every attempt, the cube remained unyielding, and scribbled in his notebook, "Another year full of weaklings." Deutsch, noting that no one had passed yet, muttered, "Who could possibly break this damn enhanced magic?" Then, Magica stepped onto the field, with Lion enthusiastically shouting encouragement for her to show off. She simply told him to quiet down. Deutsch recognized Magica as the squirrel who had caused a ruckus in the admissions office. Her name, he mused, sounded familiar. No matter, he thought. She's just a beast man, likely relying on brute force. But reinforced magic is top tier. It's impossible to destroy with mere effort, with a half-serious attack, Deutsch stated. Magica then lifted the cube, swiftly deciphering its hidden mechanisms. With a precise strike, she cracked it, then shattered it completely. The crowd erupted in applause, standing and cheering Magica for splitting the cube and doing a great job. Deutsch, witnessing this, struggled to comprehend the attack. It wasn't merely a punch of incredible speed and accuracy. Examining the shattered cube and replaying the attack in his mind, he realized she had landed numerous blows on the exact same spot. A sudden memory struck him. Magica Estate Terra, the same Magica designated by the Vatican as a risk factor. Why did this beastman come to school? He wondered aloud, then declared, "The girl passed." Next up was Lion. Approaching the cube, he confidently stated, "I'm next." Deutsch, observing him, dismissed him as a simple fool, certainly not a designated risk factor. Lion then brought a sphere directly over the cube, warning everyone to prepare. In an instant, everything was obliterated. Deutsch, shielding his eyes with his staff, struggled to comprehend the scene. Amidst the cube's million shattered fragments, Lion casually asked, "Was that normal?" Deutsch, still reeling in shock, stared at the young man. In all his years of proctoring exams, he had never witnessed such utter destruction of the cube. Then, bristling with anger, Deutsch declared, "The guy passed!" Lion, leaning towards Deutsch, affirmed his passing and expressed relief that the teacher hadn't been hurt. Deutsch, visibly distressed, announced the next examinee, though his expression conveyed a desperate need for a break to recover. Suddenly, the testing grounds were restored. Deutsch was utterly bewildered by how these self-taught students, one a Vatican-designated risk factor, had managed to decimate the entire exam site. "There were never such results!" Deutsch exclaimed to all the professors, reporting the unprecedented outcome. The admissions committee expressed concerns about the new applicants. "Are we truly certain about enrolling them?" one asked. Another professor highlighted their fourth-level abilities, suggesting, "If they join the Euphonia army, they will bring glory to our school." However, a different voice argued that their issues were clear. All eyes turned to Deutsch, awaiting his decision. He acknowledged their behavioral problems, but countered, "We don't get students with a fourth standard of living every day." The professors were convinced, if Deutsch guides them, they will become excellent students. Given Deutsch's insistence, they agreed to accept the new students. Deutsch, reviewing the roster, identified a single problematic student, Arudo. Despite his previous success, Arudo was a dropout with the first standard of living, and, by regulation, should be rejected. A grim premonition settled over Deutsch. If Arudo passed, it would forever tarnish the school's reputation. Deutsch then performed Elo's spell in Cuba. He resolved to reject Arudo, no matter the cost, placing a reinforced cube on the stage before everyone. He announced the completion of restoration work and the resumption of exams, internally vowing to prevent any first-class students from enrolling. The cube was enchanted with reinforcing magic, augmented by Alo's absorption, making it stronger with every applied force. Deutsch believed even a practitioner of powerful magic would struggle to destroy it, and so he signaled the start of the next trial. The next student to step onto the stage wasn't Arudo, causing Deutsch to internally curse. He had expected Arudo next. There had been 3 students previously. This young man had not approached the desk with them. Deutsch, skeptical that the current contestant could pass, simply instructed him to begin. The student launched his attack on the cube. Watching, Deutsch pondered, "Are all students of this level like this? This young man has no mana control at all. Why was I so concerned about Arudo when this one is far worse?" At that moment, Deutsch declared the student had failed, but then the cube began to transform. Deutsch watched, bewildered, as energy erupted from the cube, followed by a torrent of red mana. He stumbled, unable to comprehend the unfolding chaos. Everyone stared down, confused by the spectacle below. There was talk among the onlookers about how impressive the previous student had been, but the situation at hand was far more critical. The mana was rampaging. From the stands, Arudo descended, ordering everyone to evacuate, declaring he would stop the mana. As Arudo made his way down, a powerful whirlwind coalesced before him. He realized the mana wasn't just raging, something far more profound was happening. At that moment, Arudo observed Deutsch struggling against the immense pressure, realizing even his protective magic wouldn't hold. If Arudo wasn't careful, the situation would quickly spiral into disaster. Deutsch moved to assist the student, realizing his own magic was completely depleted. If the chaos continued, injuries were inevitable. Trapped within the whirlwind, Deutsch deployed a magic magic shield, but it rapidly faltered. He couldn't sustain it. Then, Arudo utilized his unique ability to calm the tempestuous winds. Deutsch watched, utterly astonished. Arudo approached them, asking if everyone was all right. Deutsch then asked Arudo, "How are you?" "I acted as instructed," Arudo replied. "It didn't matter what. You needed to deploy shields and ensure safety. I would handle the outburst," he ordered Deutsch. Deutsch admonished Arudo not to speak nonsense, asserting that even he was capable of handling such a situation. Arudo merely met his gaze. The teacher warned that the cube was now incredibly dangerous. Even the slightest movement risked an explosion. Arudo stretched out his hand towards the cube, channeling his energy to halt its volatile reaction. Deutsch watched, astounded, wondering, had Arudo neutralized the mana? Though injured, Arudo focused on the cube, successfully bringing its energy to a standstill, carefully taking it into his hands. "It seems Alos was imposed on this cube," Arudo remarked. Arudo explained that since this school exclusively enrolled students with strong magical abilities, the teacher might not be aware that this particular spell only activates with very weak magic, possessing a unique effect that makes it extremely feeble. Deutsch then looked at Arudo, asking who he was. The teacher mused that Arudo, as he had suspected, was a half-educated man with the first standard of living. He realized that even someone of such modest background could achieve anything if they worked tirelessly. Suddenly, the cube, having fully radiated its energy, shattered. Deutsch declared that Arudo had passed the exam. Subsequently, everyone congratulated the successful examinees. Later, in a store, they tried on their court school uniforms. The seller congratulated them on successfully passing the exam, and Arudo and his companions, dressed in their new attire, looked remarkably striking. Lion, adjusting his new clothes, commented that he had never worn anything so luxurious before. Arudo, addressing Lion, commented on how well the new outfit suited him, particularly Lion. When Lion didn't respond, he eventually turned to Arudo, asking for clarification. At that moment, Magica joined them, inquiring if there wasn't anything more comfortable. She was dressed in a uniform with a skirt, explaining that such an outfit would hinder her movement and her feet were freezing. Upon seeing her, the guys immediately remarked how well the attire suited her, making her look like a true aristocrat. Lion, looking at Magica, quipped with a proverb, "A stump looks good in a headdress." Magica promptly hit him on the head, retorting that he hadn't been given permission to speak. With that, they proceeded to choose the uniforms together. The seller then asked if there had been any problems with their measurements. The group affirmed that everything was perfect. Handing them a form, the seller explained that the tailoring would take no more than 2 weeks and cost 10 gold per person. Upon seeing the cost, the group seemed perplexed, unsure if they genuinely had to pay for their new clothes. Arudo, noticing their reaction, turned to them and asked what was wrong. Lion retorted that 10 gold coins could sustain someone for half a year, emphasizing that this was just clothes. Arudo then understood that his companions also had no money and stated he would pay for them, acknowledging there was no other option. Magica immediately interjected, stating that wasn't acceptable, as Arudo was already covering their exam fee. The group then approached the seller, asking if payment could be made upon receipt, and he readily confirmed that arrangement was possible. Then, effectively whisking Arudo along, they decided to head straight to the guild in search of the most profitable tasks. Arudo, bewildered, questioned if he was truly being dragged into this as well. Lion explained that as their mentor, Arudo couldn't possibly abandon his students in trouble. Thus, they arrived at the guild and scanned the bulletin board for assignments. They found requests for goblin extermination, offering 12 copper coins, and defeating a giant sewer rat for 20 silver. Lion mused, "These requests don't pay much. At this rate, we won't accumulate 10 gold coins in 2 weeks, even though there are quite a few tasks available before reaching the royal capital." Suddenly, Lion spotted a promising task with a 30 gold reward. Arudo, glancing at Lion, questioned the significant payment and the nature of the task. Upon reading, Lion revealed it required subduing a fire dragon inhabiting the northern mountains. Arudo immediately declared the task impossible. Everyone, surprised, pressed him for a reason. Arudo explained that dragons were legendary creatures, survivors of the War of the Gods 150 years prior. Merely one appearing, he stated, could unleash a catastrophe capable of destroying an entire country. Hearing of such a catastrophe, Magica wondered if such monsters truly existed in this world. Arudo clarified that while they didn't appear often, they certainly did exist. In a previous life, he had once encountered and even fought a dragon, but even at level 99, his only option was to escape. Lion then asked Arudo if the danger was truly so immense. He stated, "If that's the case, 30 gold coins is a ridiculous price. While certainly high, it's incommensurable with the risk. As a former guild employee, I'd say 1,000 gold coins would be more appropriate." Arudo realized Lion's assessment was correct. Magica turned to Lion, questioning if the request might be disinformation. Lion, still holding the paper, replied that if it were, the supervisory committee would have already removed the advertisement. "They are very strict about disinformation here," he added. Arudo realized this was his chance to alter history. "There's something hidden within this request," he mused. Arudo, now intrigued, told the group he was growing curious and felt they should accept the request. Lion, as he departed, affirmed he would handle all arrangements. Arudo stressed that encountering a dragon was exceedingly rare, necessitating proper preparation. Unbeknownst to them, someone was watching their conversation. A week later, the group once again found themselves battling monsters. Magica, perched atop a massive boar, voiced her frustration. "No matter how much we search, we only encounter minor creatures. Perhaps the task truly was a deception." Lion, scanning their surroundings, dismissed the possibility. Arudo, approaching the already defeated monster, noted the fading light and suggested they set up camp. After setting up camp, the companions lit a fire and began to eat. Lion praised the delicious food, adding that eating together remained the best part of their journey. Arudo, examining a piece of slime in his hands, commented that selling their collected materials and magic stones would cover the cost of their uniforms. He regretted that they hadn't encountered the dragon, but concluded that they should return to Euphonia tomorrow morning. As Magica ate her food, she expressed how much she would miss their joint adventures. Arudo confirmed her sentiments, saying he would miss them too. But that night, he had something he wished to give them. His companions inquired what it was. Arudo then produced pendants he had crafted using his blacksmithing skills, infusing them with all his strength, and handed one to each of them. Magica, holding her pendant, felt a mysterious force, both gentle and profoundly strong. Arudo reflected that he had initially assumed he would always be alone, yet now they sat together around a campfire. He had never imagined such warmth in his future. Thus, these pendants served as his way of expressing gratitude. Arudo, smiling, thanked his friends. After dinner, the companions drifted off to sleep. Arudo's eyes snapped open, finding the heat unbearable and sleep impossible. Soon after, everyone else stirred, questioning the intense heat. Stepping out of the tent, they discovered the forest ablaze, engulfed in flames. Could it be a dragon? Suddenly, a giant dragon let out a piercing scream. His companions, gazing at it, knew it was truly a dragon. The guild's assignment proved true. They noticed the dragon itself was engulfed in flames, an ominous sign that screamed for them to run. Just then, Lion asked about the gems. His companions grabbed him, urging him to run faster. The dragon immediately spewed flames precisely where Lion had stood moments before, and they narrowly escaped. Lion's legs smoked from the dragon's scorching attack. Trapped, they found themselves surrounded by a circle of flames. Magica declared there was nowhere left to run. It seemed their only chance of survival was to defeat this dragon. Arudo recalled that the dragons he had fought in a previous life were intelligent enough to speak like humans, but this dragon remained silent and appeared smaller, leading Arudo to deduce he faced an even mightier foe. Arudo steeled himself. He couldn't let fear overwhelm him, or he wouldn't save Hannah. Without hesitation, Arudo attacked the dragon with a water cut, reasoning that water was a fire dragon's inherent weakness. Immediately, the dragon conjured a shield, an unexpected move that stunned Arudo. He realized Magica wouldn't be able to break through it. Magica sprang into action, declaring her intent to help. Lion joined her, and together they assaulted the dragon. After striking the dragon, Magica realized its formidable physical strength, concluding that their current attacks wouldn't significantly impact its life. Arudo recalled his past life, deducing that the dragon must possess a weak spot. He shouted for Magica to distract the creature, planning to deliver a decisive blow himself. Magica attempted to draw the dragon's attention, but her efforts proved futile. Fleeing the dragon's flames, Lion exclaimed his bewilderment, wondering why he was being relentlessly pursued despite not having attacked. Arudo realized that while it wasn't the ideal moment to shift strategies, Lion's provocative skills might be key. Addressing Lion, Arudo announced he had a great plan. Lion urged his master not to delay and to reveal it. Arudo then shockingly ordered Lion to get hit by the dragon, practically begging him. Lion, utterly perplexed, couldn't comprehend what Arudo was asking. Even with his immortality, Lion refused to simply endure an attack. Arudo assured his friend that everything would be fine, promising to use his magic to weaken the dragon and asking for Lion's trust. Lion, having no other choice, reluctantly trusted Arudo. He's a very cruel mentor, Lion muttered, as he braced himself directly against the dragon. Arudo launched a hacking attack, and together they resisted the dragon. Arudo then commanded Magica to attack. Magica, observing the dragon, realized its abdominal scales were a weak point. She struck him directly, and the dragon howled in pain. Realizing her attack had worked, she knew she had to act decisively. She unleashed a freezing star. As Magica prepared to strike again, the dragon slammed her with its tail, sending her crashing to the ground, motionless. At that moment, Arudo and Lion feared greatly for Magica. Just as Magica was knocked to the ground by the dragon, the pendant around her neck suddenly activated, its properties designed to prevent instant death. As she plummeted towards the earth, she felt the pendant pulling and guiding her. This equipment prevented an instant demise, ensuring she didn't perish upon impact. Trying to get up, Magica realized the dragon was trying to step on her. The others immediately shouted her name and rushed to her aid. Moments later, the dragon stomped where Magica had been, only to find no one beneath its foot. It looked around, confused, unable to comprehend where she had vanished. Arudo had managed to save Magica. Lion helped him support her, and admitted he hadn't realized the grave spell could be used in such a way. Arudo explained that in moments like this, it was perfect for urgent evasion. Lion held Magica, asking if she was all right. She confirmed she was. He then turned to Arudo, inquiring about the antileptic. Arudo replied it was in the tent, but the dragon had burned it. Just then, the slime next to Arudo presented him with something. Arudo was stunned, struggling to believe that the slime had retrieved the antileptic. Lion clapped Arudo on the shoulder, calling him a good fellow. They immediately administered the antileptic to Magica. She quickly revived, apologizing for her carelessness. She admitted that without the pendant Arudo had given her, she certainly wouldn't have survived. Now, however, she was ready to show the dragon what she was truly capable of. The others urged her not to rush, insisting that Arudo and Lion would handle the dragon and Magica should hide with them. Magica confronted Arudo, declaring she could still fight. She argued that Lion alone would be too great a burden for Arudo, and who would finish the dragon then? Lion simply stared at Magica. Arudo, however, stated that he understood her point. It was then decided that a strategic meeting was necessary. While they strategized, the dragon continued to prowl, searching for them. Moments later, Lion stepped out to face the dragon, asking what it was looking for, boldly calling it a blockhead and proclaiming his presence. The dragon immediately charged. Lion realized he needed to distract the beast for just 1 minute while Arudo prepared a trap. He struck a nearby tree, stating aloud that he wasn't as fast as Magica and couldn't toy with the dragon for long. However, he excelled in strength and endurance. The dragon burned the felled tree Lion hurled directly in its path and continued its charge towards him. Lion then turned to Arudo, asking if he needed much longer. Arudo replied that preparation was almost complete and requested just a little more time. Lion, buying Arudo more time, hurled a stone at the dragon. The beast dodged, unwittingly falling straight into Arudo's trap. Realizing their success, Lion unleashed a powerful strike against the now ensnared dragon. Just then, Magica's voice cut through the air, shouting at Lion, "Is it faster or is it rushing towards me with all its might?" Arudo urged everyone, warning that the spell would only hold the dragon for 10 seconds. Beyond that, they wouldn't stand a chance. Lion, preparing to launch Magica, asked if Shorty was ready, to which she incredulously replied, "Are you seriously asking me that?" With a mighty heave, Lion launched Magica high into the air, shouting for her to push forward. Magica, employing Twinkling Star and Fist of Dreams, assaulted the dragon, but it merely retaliated with a burst of flame. As she descended, Magica apologized, explaining that the dragon's reaction was completely wrong. The beast, not particularly intelligent, had fallen for their trap. Using her spells as bait, they had successfully lured it into looking upwards. Now, a critical weak spot was exposed, and it was up to Lion to deliver the final blow, a task his companions believed him capable of. Wielding the Sword of Courage, Lion charged, cleaving the dragon's head clean off. In that triumphant moment, the beast fell, and the entire group erupted in cheers, celebrating their perfectly coordinated victory. Turning to Arudo, Lion eagerly asked if he could now truly call himself a dragon slayer. Arudo affirmed, praising his excellent strike. Lion, brimming with joy, declared, "I finally got it! It sounds damn brave!" Magica, however, couldn't believe that Arudo had entrusted Lion with the finishing strike. Lion was utterly taken aback by her comment, wondering if she truly intended to pick a quarrel. The next moment, Magica frankly admitted that she believed Lion had truly exerted himself this time, and she would count on him if anything else was needed. Lion, glancing at Magica, couldn't tell if she was praising him or simply insane. Arudo only silently regarded his companions, but at that moment, they all felt a sudden dizziness, unable to comprehend its cause. Clutching her head, Magica wondered aloud, was that truly dizziness from raising our level? Arudo then realized his system indicated a rise of 8 levels, bringing him to level 78. It was a significant leap, as he'd barely gained a single level recently, even after slaying numerous demons. Arudo embraced his friends, who questioned the sudden gesture. He warned that if they were to pass out now, they'd risk waking up inside a monster's stomach by morning. Summoning a stone wall for protection, they collapsed, and Arudo entrusted Rue with their safety. Rue, ever loyal, readily obeyed his master. Tonight, the moon cast a peculiarly beautiful light. The companions passed out, and the next morning, waking up, they were disoriented by what lay before them. A scorching heat enveloped them, and a blinding red light pulsed before their eyes. Opening his eyes, Arudo saw a colossal magic stone, a dragon's magic stone. Turning to Rue, Arudo asked if he had truly dragged it all the way here. A weary Rue confirmed it. Praising Rue, Arudo remarked that he'd even managed to collect a magic stone while remaining vigilant. He embraced Rue, expressing his pride, which made the spirit very happy. Magica, looking at Arudo, commented that she had never seen such a vibrant magic stone. Lion, his gaze fixed on it, echoed the question, "Is that truly a dragon's stone?" As they all gazed at it, they were struck by its sheer beauty. Perhaps if they merely presented it, people would believe they had defeated a dragon. Glancing at the massive corpse behind them, Arudo realized this stone was just one of many pieces of evidence. The next moment, drawing his blade, Arudo began to cut into the dragon's leg. Lion, bewildered, asked what Arudo was doing. Arudo replied that they weren't simply abandoning the entire dragon here. Take its scales, for instance. Sewn into clothing, they could create armor capable of deflecting iron swords. Its claws could be forged into razor-thin blades, sharp enough to cleave through steel. Even a mantle crafted from its hide was rumored to offer protection against magical attacks. Pointing to a glistening object, Arudo identified a rare and valuable component, the dragon's eyeball. It commands an incredibly high price. The others stared in shock as Arudo held up a huge eyeball. Then, his eyes gleaming, Arudo declared he had found the rarest material, the dragon's heart. At that moment, Lion fainted. Magica, lifting Arudo by the collar, tried to revive Lion, surprised that he had collapsed. Magica, looking at Arudo, asked what the dragon's heart was for. Arudo explained that if left for approximately 3 years, it transforms into a resurrecting medicine. Magica recalled hearing of similar medicine, but hadn't known it was made from dragon hearts. Lion then clarified that, unfortunately, only humans could be brought back to life. Having meticulously dismantled the dragon, Arudo calculated that the haul was certainly enough to cover the cost of their uniforms. He realized he wouldn't have to worry about money for a while. Turning to Magica, Arudo cautioned her not to overspend. Magica assented. Arudo then pondered how to transport the remaining valuable materials, unwilling to leave them behind. At this moment, Lion, now awake, mentioned how useful an inventory skill would be. Arudo was astonished by the mention of an inventory. Lion struggled to explain, suggesting it was as if Arudo was storing items in invisible cells, likely something he'd seen in games. Turning to Arudo, Lion asked for clarification, exclaiming, "What is this? It can't be. The ability to store an infinite number of things is beyond human capabilities." Arudo mused that with his bag destroyed, they would have to take only what they could carry and return for the rest. Then the slime turned towards him, and Arudo asked what was wrong. The slime then presented him with his bag, and Arudo suddenly understood how Ru had pulled it from his body. Arudo then wondered if Ru could move the dragon stone in the same way. Thinking it impossible, Arudo turned to Ru and asked if he could take in such a large amount of material. Ru merely opened his mouth and absorbed all the objects lying before him, leaving Arudo and his companions stunned. Lion, clutching the slime, declared, "Inventory doesn't exist." At this, Arudo wept, lamenting that all his careful selection of materials had been for naught. While Arudo and his companions sat, Arudo being comforted, an unseen observer watched them. This girl mused that only 3 individuals, particularly that boy, had managed to kill an entire dragon. It seemed God had been right after all. She eagerly anticipated what surprises the future held. Upon arriving at the guild, Arudo announced that everyone should listen carefully, as they had completed the dragon-slaying request. Lion then invited the guild members to inspect the materials. The evaluator remarked that while the materials seemed decent, there were many ways to acquire them, such as through auctions. The guild staff, however, stated that they could neither purchase the materials nor pay the reward, asking the group to take them back. Lion immediately countered that these were not goods intended for resale. Arudo, observing from the back, realized these proofs would be insufficient. He mused on the immutable nature of destiny, how each individual's path was ordained, and the immense difficulty of diverging from it. Such cognitive blind spots, he considered, were common consequences for those who defied their inherent fate, much like the very magic prevalent in this world. Addressing Lion, Arudo apologized, stating they had no choice but to concede. Lion, bewildered, couldn't fathom why, especially since they genuinely had defeated the dragon. Yet the guild members remained unconvinced. Arudo then explained their true objective: to earn enough for uniforms. They would pursue an alternative method to sell their materials. Lion acknowledged this as a valid course of action, yet he couldn't bring himself to agree with the surrender. Suddenly, a voice cut through the air, chastising them for their excessive noise. Arudo looked up, a wave of surprise washing over him as he saw the speaker. The girl interjected, "Even if corals are the main decoration of the guild, this is a bit much. Did you guys know about that?" They then inquired about the identity of the girl before them. She introduced herself as Citri Justice, the future head of the Duchy of Justice. Lion stated he didn't understand the stranger's words, but firmly requested she not meddle in their discussion. The girl retorted that he had inquired about her name, and she had merely answered. Then she posed, "What sort of barbarian adventurers are you?" Lion visibly struggled to maintain his composure, then demanded clarification on the girl's last remark. Arudo, intervening, urged him to calm down. Arudo studied the girl, repeating her name to himself. He recognized her as an official from the judicial body of the country of the Council of True and False, one of Euphonia's 12 generals. What was she doing here? Arudo pondered. Examining the items laid before the appraisers, the girl picked one up, identifying it as fresh spinal fluid. This proves the material was harvested only a few days after the dragon's death, confirming it hadn't been resold. They even bothered to ask the guys to buy these materials, she stated, and if Citri insists, they agreed. Next, the girl approached Arudo, leaning in to express her disbelief that he became a dragon slayer at such a young age. "I can't wait to find out what else you've saved for the future," she added, as Arudo, sweating, simply looked at her. As they left the guild, a delighted Lion clutched 150 gold coins, exclaiming he had never seen so much money. Magica, however, quickly reminded him they couldn't spend it freely. Arudo walked behind them, pondering why Citri had spoken to him instead of Magica or Lion. Had she truly uncovered his plan? He had spent over 10 years meticulously planning Hannah's rescue. His current lodging was already integral to his operations. If he had known this would happen, should he have altered the plan? He then resolved not to change anything, realizing that to do so would be a bluff. There was nothing left but to proceed as intended, confident that everything was fine. So far, everything had been fine, and Arudo reassured himself. Meanwhile, Citri was sparring in the courtyard, quickly defeating her opponent. A footman approached, asking her to stop, noting that Citri had won and seemed more active than usual. "Did something happen in the city?" he inquired. She replied that she believed she had found her little man, and affirmed that God's words truly held sway. It was worth sending a request for the extermination of dragons. The state strives to kill dragons at any cost, though it's an impossible feat for any single person. It is highly unlikely, but if someone deviates from God's ordained fate, if someone appears and kills a dragon, it is this little man who will lead the world to disaster, a new source of danger. She wasn't absolutely sure, but she couldn't disregard him. When her eyes met that boy's, a flash of fighting spirit, she mused, recalling Arudo. Citri believed that had he not walked a righteous path, he would never have revealed such a spirit. Moments later, she effortlessly deflected her opponent's attack and urged Lord Fortimus to watch closely. She intended to reveal Arudo's true nature. Under the shining sun, Arudo, Magica, and Lion arrived at school for the newly announced class placements. Lion eagerly searched for his name and found it. Lion, too, was enrolled in Class C. Adjacent to the names were the exam scores, prompting Lion to wonder why placements were no longer strictly based on merit. If this was true, why was I still in the second lowest class? Magica suggested Arudo's written exam scores were perhaps catastrophically low. Arudo then asked what class Magica had been placed in. Magica proudly announced she was in Class A and a scholarship student. Lion couldn't believe his ears, while Arudo congratulated her with genuine warmth. Magica then asked, "Weren't you also placed in Class A, Arudo?" Arudo reported his placement in Class D, utterly surprising both his companions. Lion, collapsing onto the floor, wailed that Arudo had prepared for so long, yet ended up in a class below him. He jokingly accused Arudo of perhaps writing off answers in the wrong places. At that, Magica snapped that Lion was an idiot, rebuking him for his rudeness and striking him. Arudo explained that as someone from a peasant family with a humble standard of living, anything higher than Class D was out of reach for him, regardless of his scores. Besides, Arudo revealed that school life held little importance for him. He didn't care about his placement. Everything was fine. At Arudo's words, his companions remained utterly surprised. The next moment, they arrived at school and were already saying goodbye, heading to their respective classes. Arudo hoped that both would fit into the school and approached his own class, where he believed his troubles would begin. If he remembered correctly, water would come splashing down on him the moment he opened these doors. The student who had been practicing claimed he was practicing water magic, then apologized for the mishap, insisting it wasn't on purpose, and asked for Arudo's forgiveness, dismissing him as the garbage of poor peasants. Arudo remembered the mockery from the upper classes directed at the lower ones and instantly understood the situation. Wishing him success with his practice, Arudo noted that the scenario was unfolding exactly as before. The other students, observing Arudo, were perplexed as to why he wasn't wet. The other student, regaining control of his magic, commented that his friend wasn't very good at controlling it. It was his turn, so he attacked Arudo. However, Arudo countered their magic with his own, effortlessly remaining dry. The young man who attacked Arudo couldn't comprehend how he had repelled his spell so easily. Arudo, sitting and opening his bag, mused that in his past life, such a feat would be considered great sorcery. His attackers didn't understand what he meant, concluding that Arudo must have powerful magic armor, stolen no doubt from somewhere. They were convinced they needed to reclaim it. Employing fire magic, the young man declared, that was a slightly dangerous spell, but if Arudo was wearing armor, then it was nothing terrible. Looking at his opponents, Arudo realized they were treating him like a thief. He pondered, was I really so reckless as to use offensive magic in front of everyone? Still, their abilities can't be that strong. At that moment, another student entered the class and unleashed a fireball. At that moment, Arudo leaped up and managed to prevent an attack that could have hit the girl. He moved with such blinding speed that he startled the attacker, then declared, even if it was just practice, it was dangerous to use attacking spells in class. What if someone gets hurt? Next time, he warned his opponent, be more attentive. The bewildered attacker couldn't comprehend who had just intervened. At this moment, a girl entering the classroom asked, what was going on at all? Arudo, afraid to turn around, realized this was the meeting he had long awaited. Turning, he saw Hannah standing directly before him. Approaching Hannah, Arudo casually explained that someone was merely practicing magic, assuring her everything was fine and not to worry. Arudo's eyes welled up with tears as he considered the immense pain he was destined to endure. He couldn't possibly become involved with Hannah again. Only 5 years remained of his own life. Should they rekindle their past love, he knew he would have to abandon her once more, letting them remain strangers rather than force her through such agony. Hannah's death was a mere 4 months away. Arudo left the classroom, reassuring himself that everything was fine. Mentally, he vowed to Hannah, I will definitely protect you. When Hannah saw Arudo, she couldn't believe her eyes. Her presence at this school was, for Hannah Colonel, nothing short of a miracle. The Colonels were a venerable and senior noble family in the kingdom of Euphonia. As the family's heiress, great hopes were pinned on her. Her parents provided her with one of the world's finest mentors, yet she seemed incapable of anything. The mentor, speaking to her parents, declared he had never encountered a person so utterly devoid of talent. Hannah silently observed the conversation from behind the doors. The mentor then elaborated, explaining that talent or giftedness was an integral part of human development. Her innate talent registered at an undeniable level 4, but at such a low level, nothing significant could ever be built, let alone an excellent foundation. The mentor, though hesitant to upset them, stated plainly their daughter possessed no talent. 10 years had passed since then. Just as the mentor predicted, Hannah consistently failed. No matter what she attempted, she couldn't advance even a single level. Everyone abandoned her, even her own father. Despite her struggles, Hannah fought on, managing to enroll in this school thanks to political maneuvering. The school, in turn, couldn't afford for her incompetence to become public and tarnish the esteemed Colonel name. Hannah believed she needed to be as inconspicuous as possible, to barely breathe lest she be noticed, and never voice an opinion lest she be known. Her existence had to be erased, ensuring no one would mock her, allowing her to simply remain alone. Yet, upon entering the classroom, she felt an undeniable shift in her life. She remembered a conversation with her mother, who had once spoken of her intended. Her mother admitted she didn't know who he was, but assured her that when they met, she would instinctively recognize him, as it was destiny. Upon seeing Arudo, the girl immediately recognized him as her destined betrothed. Arudo was training with a sword when the teacher instructed the students to wield their weapons as if genuinely battling demons. He declared, "You can't swing at corners. That's the whole point of practicing martial arts. I'll exclude anyone who treats this lightly." Though his tone was firm, he wasn't entirely serious. While Arudo brandished a dagger, the teacher abruptly attacked him. Arudo dodged, asking why the teacher had attacked so suddenly. The teacher demanded Arudo's weapon, stating it was too soon for him to wield it in such a manner. Arudo possessed a dragon fang dagger, a rare and precious weapon crafted from dragon teeth. The teacher inquired about its origin. Arudo thought to himself that he had forged it after slaying a dragon, but knew such a claim would be dismissed as nonsense. The teacher then asserted that Arudo would never improve if he relied solely on his weapon. The teacher declared he would keep the dagger until Arudo's skill level increased, then commanded, "Hand it over quickly." The other students students remarked that if Levante, their teacher, was a high-class adventurer, Arudo stood no chance. Arudo stood silently, anticipating what would happen next. As the teacher attacked again, he commented on Arudo's slow reaction time, finding it unacceptable that Arudo hadn't already surrendered the dagger. Arudo continued dodging, determined not to be defeated. Arudo realized the teacher was indeed a high-class practitioner. The teacher, observing Aruto's evasions, questioned if Aruto, a mere peasant, was truly capable of dodging his attacks. Perhaps Arudo was simply lucky. He then declared, "Very well, let's play tag." Upon hearing tag, Arudo pondered. The teacher then stated that if Arudo remained untouched by the end of the lesson, he could keep the dagger. Arudo, however, couldn't understand why the teacher coveted it so fiercely. Levante wouldn't simply let Arudo pass. Warming up, the teacher declared that refusal would be deemed a defeat, offering no concessions even to a peasant like Arudo. Their game had to begin. Shouting, the teacher lunged at Arudo, who skillfully dodged his attacks. Despite his imposing size, Levante moved with surprising speed, yet Arudo found him less intimidating compared to Magica. Meanwhile, the teacher internally marveled at how Arudo managed to evade every strike, attributing it to pure luck. Suddenly, Levante unleashed air magic, an unexpected move for Arudo. The teacher, attacking Arudo, believed he had trapped him. However, his strike merely hit the wall, leaving him in disbelief as Arudo had vanished from that spot. Arudo, now positioned directly behind Levante, realized how narrowly he had escaped. The teacher was clearly serious, employing offensive magic in bursts. The onlookers cheered for the teacher, urging him to maintain his aggressive pace. Hannah, however, remained silent, her gaze fixed on Arudo, anticipating his next move. As he continued to evade Levante's assaults, Arudo wondered if the teacher was truly so resolute. Cornered, Arudo reluctantly employed his distance reduction technique. In an instant, he flickered from his spot to a nearby tree. He mused that he had only recently mastered this ability, which allowed him to traverse short distances with incredible speed. Levante grew increasingly frustrated, unable to comprehend why Arudo remained so elusive. At this rate, he would surely lose. Just then, Arudo settled onto a tree branch. The teacher challenged him, asking if he truly believed he had escaped, and then pointed to Arudo's torn hem. "Was he so fast," Levante exclaimed, "that he didn't even notice his clothes were ripped? Victory is mine." Arudo, seeing his torn clothes, realized he had been watching every movement carefully, and teacher Levante definitely hadn't touched him. He deduced, "This is the wind, the magic of the wind." Levante knew Arudo wouldn't make false accusations, yet one of the other students claimed to have seen the teacher touch Arudo. Another agreed. Hannah, standing nearby, thought these guys were lying, as the human eye couldn't distinguish anything at such speed. Arudo realized his situation was dire. This wasn't a matter of distance or typical evasion. Levante held out his hand, demanding Arudo's dragon's fang as promised. Someone then shouted for everyone to wait, asserting that the teacher hadn't touched Arudo. It was Magica, who declared she had been watching the game carefully. Arudo descended from the tree, asking what Magica was doing there. Magica replied she was merely passing by, then shifted to a more pressing matter. "Is this man really a teacher?" she asked, turning to Levante. Levante looked at the girl, recognizing a significant risk factor. Magica was a state-level threat. Fearing trouble if he argued with her, he conceded it should be so. Levante, acknowledging her unique vision, turned back to Aruto. He warned that even if it was just a game, if Arudo lost, problems could arise, especially now that she was here. Levante then suggested they start all over again. He then unleashed a wind cutter, declaring it proof of his A-level adventurer status. He explained it was an advanced technique that infused magic into their hands, turning them into weapons, and challenged Arudo to try and dodge it. The next moment, Levante attacked Arudo, believing he had him trapped. This magic not only increased range, but also launched wind blades around the opponent. Watching Arudo, Levante considered him a mere student. If he died, it could easily be interpreted as an accident during training. He then willed his attack to cleave Arudo. Arudo concentrated, acknowledging the piercing sharpness of the wind blades. He resolved to avoid even a single blow from such a powerful magic. Arudo deftly dodged every blade. Levante, the teacher, was astonished, thinking it impossible for a weakling at the first level of life. Yet, a nagging doubt persisted. Could someone truly defy the expectations for his rank? He rationalized, it must have been an accident. Perhaps I'm just not feeling my best today. Levante tried to reassure himself. Still plagued by doubt, Levante drew his sword. As a teacher of the school, he couldn't tolerate losing to Arudo. He charged directly at him, blade in hand. Arudo couldn't believe Levante had drawn a real sword, finding the situation increasingly desperate. The lesson was almost over. If he could just evade this final attack, victory would be his. Just then, some other students questioned how Arudo had managed to avoid the attacks. Believing he must have a trick, they mockingly declared he should play honestly like a man, and grabbed Arudo by the legs. They urged him to attack Levante while they held him. Completely blindsided, Arudo stood helpless as Levante closed in. Laughter erupted from the other students, but only Hannah harbored a chilling thought. Is the teacher actually going to kill him? Levante scoffed internally, believing he could easily extinguish the life of a small fry at the first level. He refused to lose to someone like Arudo. Levante's attack bore down, a silent command for Arudo to die. With mere seconds remaining in the lesson, Arudo utilized a hacking skill. The teacher's sword instantly flew from his grasp, leaving him bewildered as to how it had moved on its own. Arudo then employed a distance reduction technique, instantly reappearing in a different spot, still accompanied by the students holding his legs. Following this, Arudo activated Grave and Argolization. The teacher was defeated. Arudo declared the teacher unfit, blinded by greed and self-love, and then dropped the ball right beside him. The final seconds ticked away, and the clock signaled the end of the lesson. Arudo had won. The students still holding Arudo's legs stared in disbelief at the teacher's defeat. Arudo announced the lesson was over and requested they release him. The stunned students slowly took their hands off Arudo's feet. After the lesson, students buzzed with discussions about teacher Levante, praising his coolness and lamenting that they could never replicate his movements. They wondered if they could ever aspire to be as impressive as him. Arudo walked behind the other students, realizing no one truly remembered him. He pondered the pervasive magic of this world. Just then, Magica ran up and hit Arudo. Arudo didn't understand why Magica called him inattentive, criticizing how easily he was confused by a stab in the back. As punishment, he would have to attend her training after school. Depressed, Arudo mentioned his plans to improve his blacksmithing skills today. He then claimed he hadn't lost his dagger, suggesting Magica ignore it, but she insisted otherwise. Hannah stood silently behind them, observing. Later, as the sun set, she began her solo training. During her training, thoughts of Arudo consumed her. Why did no one praise him? The teacher was certainly skilled, but did it truly seem to her alone that Arudo surpassed him? People didn't notice, but Arudo sometimes even closed his eyes during attacks. She couldn't comprehend how he managed it with only a single life level. Hannah, a level 4 herself, felt she could never imitate Arudo, believing she lacked talent. She shook her head, dismissing these negative thoughts. A natural gift couldn't simply be replaced by effort in every aspect. Arudo probably trained incredibly hard. Clutching her sword, the girl resolved that she too could achieve something if she put in the effort. The next moment, she dropped her sword, grimacing at the pain. Her hands were covered in bruises, tears welled in her eyes, but she resolved to become stronger, not for someone else, but for herself. Arudo entered the training hall, running into Hannah. He quickly apologized, explaining that he hadn't noticed any occupancy markers and assumed the hall was free. Hannah asked him to wait, then suggested they have a brief chat. Arudo initially feigned deafness, but as she repeated her request, he merely gazed silently at the door. Sitting on the floor, Hannah introduced herself as Hannah Colonel, remarking on Arudo's exceptional skill, particularly how no ordinary student could evade teacher Levante. She wondered how Arudo had become so strong. Arudo stood by the door, struggling with his resolve, acutely aware of the 5 years remaining. If he gets closer to Hannah now, he will only make her sad in the future, Arudo thought, deciding he would simply keep an eye on her. Without turning to Hannah, Arudo stated that his strength was a result of extensive training. Unexpectedly, Hannah grabbed his hand. Both were visibly embarrassed. Hannah quickly withdrew her hand, turning away as she apologized for her audacious grab. Regretting touching Arudo's hand so impulsively, Arudo gazed at Hannah, a smile touching his lips. She was exactly as he remembered her from back then. Hannah broke his reverie, asking him to hear her out. If it wasn't too much trouble, she wondered if Arudo would consider training with her. Despite her relentless efforts, she hadn't achieved any real success. Even with the guidance of excellent teachers, she made no progress and consistently fell behind. Turning to Arudo, she voiced a feeling that if he taught her, everything would finally work out, then apologized for her abrupt request. Arudo listened intently as she worried that she might have caused discomfort. He noticed her hands covered in wounds, and a pang hit him. The opportunity to communicate with her was slipping away. He was uncertain of the best course of action, yet he found himself utterly incapable of refusing the earnest request of someone so diligent and so beloved from a past life. Arudo replied that if she truly desired it, he would lend her all his strength and assistance. Hannah, beaming, extended her hand, thanking Arudo. They shook hands. She declared that she would do everything in her power. Arudo smiled, saying, "This is necessary, fantastic. We'll all try our best." Suddenly, voices declared they had heard everything. A bewildered Hannah looked up, startled. Lion stood before her, declaring, "Friends of friends are friends too." Behind him, a girl peered out. He announced this initiative was called Operation 100 Friends. Extending his hand to Hannah, he offered a warm greeting. He introduced himself as Lion and asked if he could just call her Hannah. Hannah, flustered, agreed that he could. Seeing Lion, Arudo grumbled, "Friends of friends? What are you even talking about? We're not even friends." Lion took great offense, and Arudo had to calm him. Meanwhile, Magica introduced herself to Hannah as Magica Estate Terror and said she could just call her Magica. They shook hands. Hannah, noting the 3-part name, asked if Magica was of royal lineage. Magica explained that yes, she was from a former royal family. The squirrel family had lost its power. The royal bloodline no longer held its former strength. Lion and Arudo listened attentively to Magica. Lion abruptly interrupted, demanding to know why he hadn't been informed of her royal background. Magica stated matter-of-factly that it was obvious because she hadn't mentioned it. Lion exploded, proclaiming that if she was truly blessed with royal birth, then his own rare heroic talents paled in comparison to hers. Looking at Magica, he continued, "I thought she was just quiet. How could such a small creature be of royal blood?" True to form, they immediately began to bicker, while Arudo and Hannah observed from the sidelines. Hannah turned to Arudo, asking if they should intervene. Arudo reassured her, stating that Lion was unusually strong and would be fine. Once he couldn't defeat a single demon, but now he possessed the strength to contend with Magica. Arudo knew Hannah would succeed. She would definitely become stronger. A few days later, not far from Euphonia, Hana, the group headed into the forest for training. Arudo introduced Hana and Slime. Together, they tackled obstacles and challenges as a team. Periodically, Arudo offered Hana assistance, inquiring if she was alright. She confirmed she was. Then Magica inquired about Hana's level. The girl revealed she was level 4 but lacked talent, preventing her from developing any skills beyond level 1. Hearing this, Magica and Lion stared, asking if Hana was joking. "How could someone possess no innate talent?" Lion exclaimed. Tears welling, Hana apologized. Arudo then told Lion to mind his words. Lion, however, declared it great, much to everyone's astonishment. Lion clarified that while a gift, or talent, aids in ability development, it doesn't dictate one's only path. Abilities aren't inherently tied to a specific lifestyle, and lacking such a gift doesn't mean one can't forge their own way. "Isn't that wonderful?" he asked. An idea struck Arudo. Lion was right. Hana had never heard such an interpretation of talent deficiency before. Arudo remarked that it was such a brilliant idea, he couldn't believe it came from Lion. Magica confessed she always thought Lion was an idiot. Everyone stared at Lion, who then asked why they held such a low opinion of him. They arrived at a lake, deeming it a suitable spot. Hana, curious about the training, suggested practicing on trees since they were in the forest. Arudo explained that this training would be under real conditions. From now on, Hana would face real monsters. The revelation shocked Hana. She stared at Arudo, declaring she couldn't possibly do it. She couldn't just suddenly kill a monster. Her level was 1, she reminded Arudo. Did he forget? All three, including Arudo, fixed their gaze on Hana. She reiterated that she couldn't defeat monsters without experience. Arudo, pulling something from his bag, reassured her. "Everything's fine," he said. "I won't let anyone hurt you." Just then, goblins materialized before them. Lion protested that Arudo was being too cruel to Hana. Magica added that Arudo didn't need to lure quite so many goblins. Arudo announced he had an idea. He turned to his friends, motioning for them to lean in as he whispered his plan. His friends immediately understood. "The plan is truly worthy of a master," Lion replied. Both Magica and Lion were inspired and ready for battle. Arudo then handed the sword to Hana, announcing their readiness to begin. Hana, however, admitted she wasn't ready yet. Arudo expressed his trust in his companions, and together, they charged into the fray. Magica skillfully dodged goblins. She leaped, quickly realizing that dispatching them one by one would be a waste of time. Unleashing an area attack, knowing her power was more than enough for such monsters. This was Magica's consistent strategy. Meanwhile, Arudo activated a bright stone, joining the assault against the goblins. Hana watched in awe at her companion's strength. Just then, a goblin lunged from the bushes, and she realized she was utterly unprepared. Arudo instantly shielded her, closing the distance in a flash, determined to keep Hana safe. Dispatching the goblin, Arudo turned to Hana, asking if she was hurt. She replied that she was fine. Arudo then realized the moment had come. Just then, Lion was overwhelmed by goblins, shouting that he'd let his guard down and was surely doomed. Hana saw Lion buried under a pile of goblins and cried out for help. She turned to Aruto, exclaiming that Lion was in trouble. Aruto, waving off a goblin, apologized for being momentarily busy, then calmly told Hana to save him. Hana, hearing this, protested that she couldn't, but Arudo assured her everything would be fine. The monster's attention was solely on Lion, giving Hana an opening to attack from behind, but she was riddled with self-doubt. Arudo, however, believed everything was proceeding according to plan. Arudo's strategy hinged on Lion's abilities, his exceptional distraction skills, remarkable physical prowess, and immortality. These traits allowed Lion to remain the goblin's primary target indefinitely. With Lion drawing the enemy's attention, Hana should be able to handle the immediate threats. She and Magica could then cope with the remaining goblins. The critical question, however, was whether Hana possessed the courage to defeat the monsters. Hana clutched her sword with trembling hands, overwhelmed by fear. But if not her, then who? Resolved to recall her training, she attacked a goblin from behind, inflicting an injury. Tears welled in her eyes. Magica observed the wound was too minor to be fatal, but suspected Hana's psychological damage was far greater. Arudo watched Hana, who was visibly terrified. Her friend had been attacked right before her eyes, and she blamed herself for her fear in a similar situation, agonizing over her weakness. Just then, Arudo called out to her, assuring her she could do it. His voice filled with confidence. Hana gripped her sword tightly, resolve hardening within her. She wanted to become stronger. If Arudo was next to her, she felt she could find the courage to be strong. Hana charged towards the goblins, swinging her sword with newfound strength, her inner monologue declaring an end to her self-pity. Determined to become strong, she pushed relentlessly forward. A goblin fired an arrow towards Hana's back, but Magica intercepted it. Magica rebuked the goblin for interfering, returning the arrow with equal force. Hana attacked the goblins again, and after cleaving one in two, a surge of confidence washed over her, realizing her growing capability. Suddenly, Hana reeled, almost losing consciousness. Arudo caught her, his voice laced with concern as he asked if she was all right. She apologized to Arudo, explaining she merely felt dizzy. Arudo informed her that it was due to a level increase. Hana was overjoyed, her mind racing with the confirmation of her level up. Then, Hana burst into tears, crying on Arudo's shoulder. She had been waiting for this moment for all her 15 years. Their moment was interrupted by Lion, who grumbled about how long he had to lie there with goblins still piled on top of him. Arudo admitted he had completely forgotten about Lion. Hana, meanwhile, questioned how Lion could remain remain so calm. Lion, bleeding and still pinned by goblins, declared himself quite brave, asserting such monsters couldn't harm him. Arudo then revealed it had been a plan to foster Hannah's bravery. Upon hearing this, Hannah understood everything. Hannah released Arudo from her embrace, who then suggested they take a break until she calmed down. Hannah replied that she was fine and ready to continue. Arudo smiled at her, agreeing. First, he called his slime, Ru, and asked it to retrieve his sword. Arudo then offered Hannah this very sword. It was a sword crafted from dragon bone. Arudo explained that the sword was made of dragon bone, and he had crafted it specifically for Hannah, utilizing her blacksmithing skills. Taking the sword in her hands, Hannah thought it was truly beautiful. Behind her, goblins were already poised to attack Hannah. Drawing the sword, she attacked them. After dispatching the goblins, she marveled at the weapon's properties, wondering how such a powerful attack could be unleashed with a mere flick of her wrist. She exclaimed that she couldn't possibly wield such an amazing sword. Arudo pointed to the sword, stating his belief that a tool in a person's hand can teach them. This sword was meant to make her stronger, Arudo explained, certain she could now become stronger. He urged Hannah to believe in herself. Hannah gripped the hilt tighter, agreeing with Arudo's words. Magica and Lion merely smiled, watching Hannah. Arudo announced they would continue to help her raise her levels for some time. They would gradually increase the number of opponents, carefully monitoring Hannah's progress. Moments later, Hannah was once again engaged with goblins. Soon, they believed they had defeated all of them. Arudo ran up to Hannah, commending her good work and asking if she was hurt. Arudo wondered what level Hannah had achieved. Checking her status, Hannah asked Arudo to look. Arudo then saw that Hannah's unique talent had manifested. Her level was 31, and the talent was called the Germ of a Hero. Arudo approached Hannah, and upon seeing her talent, the Germ of a Hero, asked Lion if he had ever encountered such a thing. Lion, in turn, addressed Arudo, asking if Arudo himself had ever heard of or seen such a talent. Magica, standing behind them, overheard the mention of heroes' germs and immediately realized Hannah was the one she had been searching for. The world of fortune was governed by 6 gods: Largo, god of war; Diatonic, goddess of life and birth; Zamades, god of craft; Nices, who controlled soul and fate; Fortemis, god of justice and order, and the chief deity of the squirrel tribe; and Amano Iloha, lord of nature. Magica, princess of the squirrel tribe, had been born from Amano Iloha's divination. The prophecy declared, together with the hero, she will transform this world. Magica's mission was to find the owner of this heroic gift and become their right hand. 7 years after meeting and working with Aruto, she had finally found a hero. Hannah's talent remained undeveloped, likely due to the machinations of the god Fortimus. The cult of Fortimus, with the world's largest following, wielded tremendous power. The kingdom of Euphonia, where they currently stood, fell under his dominion. Under the guise of justice and order, Fortimus relentlessly eliminated anyone who displeased him. Hannah's world-changing talent had been suppressed all this time, likely because it posed a direct threat to Fortimus. Observing Hannah, Magica realized Arudo had broken this seal. Following Arudo had been the right decision. Now they only needed to see if they could nurture Hannah's talent. Just then, Arudo called out to Magica, asking if she had any ideas. Noticing the girl seemed deep in thought, Magica replied that there was nothing amiss. She mused that revealing the truth about Hannah's heroic gift now would only burden her. It was still too early. At that moment, Hannah turned, apologizing and suggesting they return home since morning had arrived. She was also worried that her butler would be anxious. Hearing this, Arudo agreed. Hannah had already raised her level more than enough. Hannah then turned to Arudo, saying she had another request. Arudo wondered what she would ask. Then, embarrassed, Hannah asked if they could go to her house together. Arudo replied that she would need an explanation for returning so late. Arudo recalled visiting Hannah's house after training in his previous life. Back then, he had injured her, enraging the butler. He realized they truly needed to go together. Turning to Magica and Lion, Arudo asked them to first visit the guild and sell the large stones. Upon arriving at the house, Hannah and Arudo beheld it. Arudo found it so beautiful, he felt he could never tire of looking at it. Hannah asked Arudo if he was surprised, explaining that the first head of the Colonel family had been one of the founders of the Euphonia kingdom. The doors opened for them, and they entered the mansion. As they moved through the portrait-lined corridor, Hannah spoke about her family. All subsequent family members had been outstanding, playing many important roles in the country's history. Arudo then asked if she would follow in their footsteps, and she affirmed. Her lack of talent was thus a monumental problem. Arudo simply remained silent. The next moment, they entered a room, and Hannah asked Arudo if he could wait. "I won't be long," she added, to which Arudo agreed, sitting on the sofa. As Hannah went further into the room, Arudo stated that the butler could emerge. Appearing before Arudo seemingly out of nowhere, the butler, surprised to have been noticed, introduced himself as Klein. Klein, head butler of the Colonel house, then made some inquiries about Arudo, asking if his assumption that the young man's name was Arudo was correct. Arudo noted that since the butler was here and had been hiding, he likely wished to speak privately. The butler praised Arudo's perceptiveness and asked to get straight to the point. What was Arudo's purpose in coming to Hannah, given there were around 30 other students? Klein wished Arudo to explain why he had chosen Lady Hannah. Arudo knew it was no secret that Colonel represented the highest nobility. If he claimed it was mere coincidence, the butler, considering Arudo a peasant, would never believe him. So Arudo explained that he and Lady Hannah, despite her lack of talent, seemed to understand each other. "We've both experienced a similar standard of living, knowing what it's like to be a beggar," Arudo elaborated. Klein, looking directly at Arudo, simply responded that Arudo and Hana shared similar circumstances, acknowledging that it must be difficult for Arudo. In fact, Klein observed, Lady Hana has begun to smile much more often lately, and it seems that is thanks to Arudo. The butler then thanked Arudo as he poured tea and proceeded to ask one final question. Klein inquired what kind of relationship Arudo envisioned with Miss Hana in the future. Arudo, after placing a cup before him, hearing the question, recalled his past and responded that he hoped they could become best friends. The butler remained silent. Then, turning to Arudo and sweeping a mug off the table, he declared, "This cannot be. You are merely a peasant." In the next instant, the butler held a knife to Arudo's throat. With the blade pressed against Arudo's neck, the butler stated that Arudo's desire to befriend a nobleman was outrageous. "Never again," the butler demanded, "are you to get involved with Lady Hana." Arudo observed the butler, noting the abrupt and unnatural shift in his demeanor after their initial friendly interaction. This sudden hostility mirrored a past event, when Arudo had inadvertently caused Hana harm, and Klein's rage had erupted. It was as if an unseen force manipulated his emotions, fueling his anger towards Hana and attempting to trap Arudo in the same tragic fate he experienced in his previous life, a consequence of Fortimus's pervasive magic in this world. If Arudo remained silent now, history would undoubtedly repeat itself. He had to alter his destiny. Leaping back from his chair, Arudo confronted the butler, demanding to know why he couldn't contact Hana. The butler scoffed, "Can Arudo not grasp that a lady is deemed unworthy if she associates with commoners, especially those of significantly lower standing, and even more so if that individual presumes to be her intellectual equal?" Arudo, however, believed the butler was the one lacking dignity. He knew Hana had grown significantly stronger during their training, potentially even excelling among the D-class. Had Klein truly done for her over the past 15 years? The butler vehemently denied this possibility. Arudo countered, asserting the truth of his words. Hana had remained at level 1 all this time, and Klein had merely watched over her without attempting to facilitate any actual growth. "Isn't that a lack of dignity?" Arudo declared, wrenching the knife from the butler's grasp. He then revealed his awareness of 5 additional butlers, concealed within the room by stealth skills. Producing a handful of knives, Arudo displayed the weapons he'd taken from the hidden butlers. "The first butler appeared to be the strongest among them," Arudo stated. "But if I could disarm them all so easily, their true skill level is clearly far from impressive, and what he would do if the situation escalated out of control." Arudo then challenged Klein, asking if his noble dignity would truly prevent him. Witnessing this, the butler questioned the entire purpose of Arudo's actions. Just then, the door opened. Hana entered, apologizing for the wait and offering to show Arudo the palace. Spotting Klein, she asked why he was present. Arudo smiled, remarking that the butler was treating him like a friend. The butler replied that he and Lady Hana were acquainted, making his presence entirely natural. Arudo then expressed his hope that they would meet again soon. Bowing to Arudo, the butler echoed his sentiment, hoping for their next encounter. They exited the room and continued through the palace. As Arudo walked behind Hana, he considered that his actions, though potentially punishable as assault, were the only way to instill the necessary fear. He reflected on his past life. They were killed by Semijin, who had appeared without warning and was unstoppable. If Arudo and Hana had been prepared and fortified their defenses, everything could have been different. They were the only ones who might have survived that tragedy, Arudo realized. Hana turned to Arudo, attempting to get his attention. Deep in thought, Arudo simply uttered, "Apologize." As Hana opened the room's door, she commented on how unusual it was to see him so distracted. They stepped into Hana's brightly lit room, noticing the neatly arranged items everywhere. Arudo realized this was his first time in her personal space. In his previous life, he'd never ventured beyond the living room. He wondered, was this truly Hana's bedroom back then? Hana confirmed it was indeed her bedroom, much to Arudo's surprise. She then explained that it was customary among the nobility to invite close friends into their private chambers, and she wished to thank him properly. Hana turned to Arudo, expressing her deep gratitude. Arudo, however, stated that her newfound strength was her own merit. He had only helped. Hana, blushing, admitted she had anticipated that exact response from him. Hana began, "If Arudo doesn't mind, could we—" Arudo didn't let her finish, his mind racing with a grim realization. In his previous life, Hana had also confessed her feelings and offered to be with him, but he couldn't allow that now. Accepting her confession would mean swearing his life to her, leading them to dream of a happy future, and inevitably, repeating the past tragedy. He knew he had to refuse her, for Hana's sake. Hana, blushing, then asked if he would be her best friend. Arudo was completely taken aback, utterly unprepared for such a question. The embarrassed Hana stood before him, awaiting his answer. Arudo, blushing, mentally chastised himself. How could I have thought she was going to confess her love? What was I even thinking? He felt a prick of embarrassment. Seeing him, Hana asked how he was, then suggested he sit down and offered her hand. Arudo replied he would certainly be happy to be her friend. Smiling, Hana thanked Arudo and expressed her delight. She mused that while she couldn't yet say if he would be her boyfriend, there was no need to rush. Now she could spend ample time with Arudo. A moment later, Hana bid Arudo farewell, thanking him for the day. Arudo apologized for staying so long, then noticed a sword standing beside a glass display. Arudo approached the sword, about to speak, when Hana noticed his intense focus. "This sword is crafted from a very rare ore called orichalcum," Hana explained, adding that it was forged for the first head of her family in the aftermath of the War of the Gods. Seeing the blade, Arudo finally understood what orichalcum was, experiencing its presence for the first time. Hana revealed it was a Carnell family heirloom, yet no one had ever been able to wield it. Arudo wondered why, as the sword didn't appear heavy enough to warrant such a restriction. Regarding these restrictions, Hana explained that a powerful force was invested in the sword, intended to fight for all that was important in the world. However, it became unusable after the first head of the family participated in the kingdom's foundation. Hearing this, Arudo simply gazed at the sword, musing that perhaps it was because one couldn't fight for the interests of other countries while protecting one's own. Still, Hana turned to Arudo and asked if he was certain he didn't want to have dinner with her. Arudo, though pleased, had to decline. It wouldn't be right for a peasant like me to stay here all night, he explained. Hana affirmed his reasoning. Arudo, addressing Hana, apologized for leaving but offered to see her tomorrow at school. He then declared to Hana that they were best friends from that day on and forever. As Arudo departed, a somber thought crossed his mind. The tomorrow they hoped for might never arrive. He wished Hana would remember his presence in this world, regardless of what transpired. Hana watched him leave. Arudo knew Hana's death was only 7 hours away. Arudo returned home to be greeted by the slime. Entering the house, Arudo announced his return, then asked if the goblins had sold magic stones. The slime promptly regurgitated a pile of coins. Arudo observed the large quantity. You'll need to ask the others to give coins to Hana, Arudo instructed. Hearing this, the slime looked surprised, as if asking a question. Arudo asked Rue to stay in Lion or Magicy's room today, as he had some personal matters to attend to, and requested Rue to send his greetings. Rue reached out to Arudo, who wasn't sure if the slime was protesting. As Rue climbed onto him, Arudo realized he hadn't spent much alone time with Rue recently. Smiling, Arudo embraced Rue, holding him close. Later, after Rue fell asleep and night had fully descended, Arudo simply gazed out the window. Arudo knew Sumijin would soon appear on this road, heading towards the Colonel family home. Arudo intended to intercept him here, which was why he chose this particular room. He then summoned his skill table, questioning if he could truly defeat Sumijin with his current stats, should he find himself unable to resist once more. In his previous life, Arudo had never imagined such weakness. Now was not the time for doubts. He had risked everything for this day. All that remained was to fight with every ounce of his strength. Arudo was determined to defeat Sumijin, whatever the cost, to avenge everything he had endured in his past life. That day, a pall hung over the capital. It was unclear whether the cause was fire or a demon attack. From a rooftop, Arudo surveyed the scene, noticing a mansion ablaze near the royal castle, the Colonel house. Everyone inside had been killed. Rushing towards the burning structure, Arudo desperately tried to comprehend what had transpired. His only concern was Hana safe? Approaching the house, Arudo spotted a stranger. The butler stood before this man, shielding Hana and her mother. The stranger declared that this was why they understood everything now. Holding a sphere of energy in his hand, the man stated, "At this very moment, Hana Colonel would be dead by the will of the ruler." The butler then questioned, "How is this possible? And Sumijin Salwi himself, one of Euphonia's 12 generals, would carry out such an act?" The man retorted, "The 12 generals of Euphonia are the government. Furthermore, they are a detachment working for the good of the country. This was an order, and everything Sumijin did was completely legal. Doesn't the butler believe that a mere butler shouldn't have interfered, standing here defending Hana and her mother?" The butler, baffled by the decree, listened as Hana's mother questioned why the government was doing this to her daughter. Turning to Lady Hana, the butler declared, "How could there be a decree ordering the murder of a 15-year-old girl? As her butler, I will show no mercy to Sumijin, even if he is one of the 12 generals, should he harm Lady Hana." When the butler attempted to attack, Sumijin repelled him with a single finger. Sumijin noted the butler's determination, reflecting that he had hoped the Duchess's butler might, for once, make him feel something. Yet the butler had disappointed him by burning a man, Sumijin stated, confirming the butler's gruesome fate. Hana, witnessing this horror, screamed Klein's name, reaching out to him in disbelief. Arudo merely observed the unfolding situation. Sumijin dismissed it all as futile, admitting that even after killing the butler, he felt nothing. The magician mused he might feel something if there were more at stake. He turned to the girls, asking if they understood. Hana looked at her mother, who reassured her, saying everything would be fine and she would protect her. Hugging her daughter tightly, she whispered, "I love you, my sweet Hana." Hana's mother stepped forward to shield her daughter, telling the magician to stay away from the young girl. She declared his goal was to destroy the dukes. Sumijin countered, "That's not it at all. From this moment, the Colonel family will be safe," Sumijin announced. The original plan was to exterminate the entire family, but the owner of the house obeyed the king's order. Hana's father rejected Lady Hana in accordance with the king's decree. Hearing this, the mother cried out in disbelief, while Hana's face crumpled as she realized her father's betrayal. Sumijin stated that the true duke knew what was more important than this girl. He knew what outweighed even his wife's life. "You are still the duke's wife," he sneered, then pierced the woman, declaring that abandoning his daughter for the sake of the family was nothing short of stupidity. Watching it all, Hana sat sobbing, her mother now dead. Sumijin remarked on the beautiful expression on the girl's face. "Perhaps she is the same as me, for God's will is paramount. But most of all, I want to know if people truly exist," he mused. He then asked Hana if she ever felt that people in this world only seem to have their own will, but are in fact nothing more than illusions created by God's magic. Sumijin admitted he had conducted countless experiments but couldn't find an answer, hoping the girl might tell him whether she was an illusion or a person. Tearfully, Hana affirmed that she she was a person. Sumijin immediately demanded, "Who allowed you to speak? I was asking your soul." Hana recoiled in fear, and Sumijin seemed to relish the expression on her face. It appeared he was finally beginning to understand something through her. He unleashed a barrage of wind swords at Hana, observing her reaction, and declared, "This is perfect. The girl is the best." Arudo emerged from his hiding spot, demanding Hana's release. Sumijin turned at the sight of Arudo, who then found himself unable to move. "What a perfect moment," Sumijin remarked. "For you, young man, cannot possibly believe you have a right to exist." Approaching Arudo, Sumijin stared him down and declared, "You don't deserve to live. You're just a little boy who dared to interrupt my research, and by doing so, you're practically begging for death." Sumijin considered killing Arudo, but then remembered he couldn't simply take the life of anyone not connected to the kernels. Turning to Arudo, he proposed a different approach. A brilliant idea struck him, prompting him to conduct an experiment. Arudo would be the observer, as he proceeded to kill Lady Hana. Lady Hana's pain, mixed with Arudo's despair, would allow him to truly experience what it meant for people to exist, rather than mere illusions. What a brilliant plan, he mused, reaffirming his belief that Sumijin was undeniably a genius. Arudo silently stretched out his hand, attempting to reach Hana. Sumijin observed that Arudo couldn't even scream, explaining that this was due to his standard of living, an immutable law of fortune, the very will of God. He advised Arudo to grasp this concept fully, for having been born with only 2 weeks of life, Arudo could only sit silently, utterly powerless. Arudo desperately wanted to move, to beg Sumijin to stop, but Sumijin unleashed the full force of his power on Hana, and the girl perished. Arudo could only watch, tears streaming down his face. Sumijin then declared the mission complete. He feigned regret, yet the magician felt absolutely nothing. The next moment, he casually flung Arudo aside, who lay weeping, tormented by his failure to save Hana, by his own profound weakness. Sometime later, Hana's body was discovered under a watermill in a stream on the outskirts of the city. A letter found with her claimed she lacked talent and couldn't bear to disgrace her family's name. The handwriting on the note was distinctly not Hana's, yet it was presented as proof that she had orchestrated her own death. Arudo sat by a window, recalling these events, and vowed never to let such a tragedy repeat. With only an hour remaining until Hana's death, suddenly, a figure in a raincoat appeared on the street, and Arudo immediately lunged at him. Sumijin asked who he was, and Arudo introduced himself as just Arudo, a peasant with the first standard of living. Sumijin seemed surprised. Arudo then revealed, "You are the 12th General Euphony, Mr. Sumijin Salway, aren't you?" The magician replied that if Arudo knew this, he couldn't simply walk away, as he had an ongoing matter. Arudo retorted that he couldn't, for he was there to put an end to this stupidity. Hearing the word stupidity, Sumijin stated he was merely fulfilling a royal order. Since Arudo intended to stop him, he would simply have to eliminate Arudo. Arudo felt the familiar paralysis. Sumijin had used submission, rendering Arudo immobile. The magician attacked Arudo with his staff, admonishing him, "Get out of my way! How dare you interfere with me? You have no idea what you're getting into." Arudo only stared at Sumijin, who couldn't comprehend the look in Arudo's eyes. Pushing him further would be pointless, so Sumijin urged Arudo to give up. Throwing Arudo against the wall, Sumijin wiped sweat from his brow, pondering the strangeness of losing his temper. He found it peculiar how stubborn some children could be, a mere bump, often disrupting everything. The next instant, Arudo materialized before Sumijin, clutching his dragon bone dagger. Sumijin hadn't anticipated this at all, and then a shift in Arudo's displayed stats showed increased resistance. His life level had ascended from 1 star to 2. The magician noted Arudo's attack, unable to comprehend how a child with only a first level of life could possibly land a blow on him. What exactly was happening? Arudo recalled that during his week of training with Magicka and Lion, he had already adjusted his life level. The main issue had been enemy spells, specifically submission, but he had anticipated that with his current experience, he would soon develop resistance. As expected, the restriction lifted after several attacks, and Arudo mused that everything was proceeding according to plan. Arudo had never imagined his fundamental status could change. Yet, he had successfully altered his level, a feat considered impossible by the world's laws. "This must be the power of the creation talent," Arudo mused. Arudo seemed to have just awakened. Observing Arudo from the air, Sumijin was unsure what trick Arudo was performing. Nevertheless, Sumijin informed Arudo that his interference would not alter the inevitable outcome. Arudo retorted that it was absolutely not Sumijin's decision to make. Recognizing Arudo's genuine confidence, the magician scoffed, "What could such an insignificant guy hope to achieve by challenging the might of my staff?" Dodging, Arudo marveled at the lightness of his body. The sheer amount of mana he now commanded was incomparable. Confident he could cast any spell, Arudo admitted to the magician, "Yes, I may be an insignificant mage, but I intend to protect those dear to me." Arudo then invoked a barrage of spells: the concentrated fire magic of a shooting torch, the concentrated ice magic of an icicle coffin, the concentrated air magic of a storm ascension, and the concentrated water magic of a hydraulic explosion. Witnessing this, Sumijin understood everything. Arudo was simultaneously wielding several advanced level spells. This was no ordinary fight to be won with bare hands. Continuous assault was necessary. Sumijin realized that by acknowledging Arudo's power, he had already escalated the confrontation. Sumijin unleashed a deadly flash of black ash against Arudo. In turn, Arudo countered with all his spells. Observing the incoming attack, Arudo realized his 4 spells were only equivalent to a single one from Sumijin, confirming Sumijin's reputation as truly the best magician in the country. However, Arudo found Sumijin's skill not as overwhelming as he initially believed. With this level of challenge, he saw a distinct chance of victory. In the next instant, Arudo deployed water balloons, creating a dense cloud cloud of steam. Sumijin swiftly recognized Arudo's tactic, understanding he aimed to obscure his vision. Arudo immediately closed the distance, attacking Sumijin with his sword. Sumijin flawlessly parried and evaded every strike. Sumijin declared Arudo's efforts an annoyance, reminding him that defeating one of Euphonia's 12 generals was far from simple. Arudo struggled to comprehend how Sumijin dodged his attacks so flawlessly, recognizing his opponent's formidable agility in addition to his magical prowess. Determined not to miss again, Arudo prepared for another assault on Sumijin. Sumijin, perceiving Arudo as a persistent, annoying fly, deployed a sensitive grid of highly concentrated mana. Within this area, he could detect the slightest movement or mana flow. He dared Arudo to enter, warning that touching the grid would be his undoing. As Arudo neared the grid, Sumijin initially believed he was attacking. However, he quickly realized the grid hadn't registered Arudo, who had subtly changed his trajectory. Detecting no active magic, Sumijin wondered, what exactly is Arudo doing? In the very next moment, Arudo struck Sumijin, who could barely believe it had happened. Arudo declared the fight finished, yet Sumijin, to his astonishment, began to thank him, mentioning a lord. Looking up, Arudo realized a street lamp was plummeting directly towards him. He managed to dodge it, prompting the magician to remark that Arudo wouldn't appreciate his thanks. Even so, the magician questioned Arudo, demanding, what kind of trick reflected Sumijin's magic? I couldn't detect its activation yet. That was my magic, wasn't it? Arudo internally confirmed this was a hack he'd implemented specifically for this battle. His plan involved using steam to disorient the magician, forcing him into a confined space. Only one step remained, and it was no mere accident. If a god truly intervened, Arudo wouldn't have stood a chance from the start. As Arudo pondered this intently, the magician, receiving no reply, decided that if Arudo didn't wish to answer, it wasn't truly necessary. Using the oracle of the god Fortimus, the magician then declared his order to eliminate the germ of the hero as soon as possible. However, the emergence of such an obstacle suggested something deeper. Hearing germ of the hero, Arudo wondered why Sumijin knew about this talent. He decided to question the magician further about it. Sumijin complimented Arudo's quick reaction, then asked if he had ever heard of the hero's talent. He explained it as a rare gift, appearing only once every century. Historically, this gift always manifests just before a major war. While the hero's talent sounds grand, it's actually the worst kind. Its very existence sowing discord in the world. Thus, the god Fortimus attempts to eliminate the hero while still a fetus. Sumijin was a trusted individual. Arudo now understood the foolishness of his past actions. The magician then turned to Arudo, elaborating on the situation. Arudo, addressing the magician, proposed that perhaps it was the opposite, catching the magician completely by surprise. Arudo then asserted that it wasn't the hero who caused discord in the world, but rather discord in the world that caused a hero. The magician challenged Arudo to prove this claim. Arudo admitted he couldn't, but argued the probability of his theory being true was greater than zero. The magician stated he appreciated a doubting mind, but insisted that without a theory, Arudo must remain silent. He concluded it was time to end this, attacking Arudo and demanding if he would finally surrender. Arudo realized the magician was attacking him even at point-blank range. Sumijin observed that Arudo showed no fear. His face was devoid of any pain. Yet, even upon seeing him, the magician sensed no feeling, demanding Arudo's death. Was it really impossible? So they fought. Arudo understood that if God intervened again, he would continue fighting until it occurred. Arudo attempted to dodge the magician's attacks. Noticing Arudo, the magician sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The next moment, Arudo landed a punch directly on the magician's face, catching him completely off guard. Arudo followed up with several more strikes, declaring, "It's already too late." Sumijin could not comprehend what was happening. Arudo was moving with a drastically different demeanor than before. Did he not give his best until that moment? As Arudo pinned the magician to the ground, Sumijin felt his body suddenly become impossibly heavy. What was it? Was it really a weight spell? Wasn't it lost during the war in the Age of the Gods? Even as the kingdom's greatest magician, he found himself unable to counteract this magic. But why is this cordoning off? Perhaps Arudo has been casting a spell on himself all this time, exposing himself against him. At that moment, the magician roared at Arudo to disappear. Such disrespect. He would never forgive Arudo. As Arudo witnessed the power the magician concentrated into the staff, he realized its true nature. Mana pulsed erratically from the staff, and Arudo, observing this, understood it could not withstand such power. No single artifact could accept such an amount of mana. Was a heavenly crystal installed in this staff? The magician declared it was too late for Arudo to realize anything. This staff is made from the bones of dead kings and Orichalcon. It is a masterpiece of the kingdom's technology, and the main element of the staff is an artificial celestial crystal. If used, it will cause huge damage to the area. He was certain he would lose his post as general of Euphonia, but that no longer mattered. Of the one who mocked him, he wouldn't even leave ashes. Towering high above Arudo in the air, the magician commanded the staff to unleash the absolute power of absolute death upon Arudo, demanding ruthless destruction. Use the artifact of the mourner of the setting sun. Arudo understood he could not evade this blow. Escaping the immediate destruction zone, Arudo braced himself. The magician magician landed, thinking Arudo possessed the strength of a first-class wizard. But Arudo played, and to think he spent almost all his mana on some peasant. The magician regretted not killing the Colonel family long ago, having heard an experienced butler worked for them. He had hoped to conserve his magic. Regardless, he needed to reach them, making his way through the avalanches. But then he saw Arudo standing before him, unable to comprehend how this was possible, or why Arudo was still alive. Arudo, gazing at the bleeding magician who clutched his hand, realized how close he had been to death the moment the magic was released. Arudo had activated his prepared hack. He withstood the blow for as long as possible, simultaneously activating the grave and falling into a crack he created. Arudo avoided a direct hit, but the shockwave itself was powerful enough. If this technique had been launched when Arudo was at full magical power, he would have definitely died. From where Arudo was, the magician warned him not to approach, then struck him right on the head with a stone. Arudo, struggling to keep his footing, knew he could win. Compared to the pain of losing Hana, the magician's attacks felt insignificant. Approaching the magician, Arudo declared him a weakling. To protect those he held dear, he would defy fate and delete manga head-on. The magician was flung away, now lying unconscious directly in front of Arudo. Arudo drew his sword, holding it over the magician. He knew he had to kill him while he was down, otherwise Hana would be in danger again. He considered this his chance. His earlier attack had proven effective. He was certain the same tactics wouldn't work again, so he had to kill him now. Yet, he hesitated. Just then, Lion arrived, leaping from the roof. "Master, what happened?" he exclaimed, bewildered by the scene. Arudo recognized Lion. Lion hurried to Arudo, asking what occurred, but stumbled, twisting his leg and collapsing. Arudo sheathed his blade. As Lion tied up the magician, he sensed the gravity of the situation, but assured Arudo that all was well. "The vile Sumijan has been captured," Lion declared. "Killed by me, and twice by Master Lin." Arudo corrected him, explaining that he hadn't truly defeated him. "Anyway, Hana is just a talent, a germ of a hero." "What nonsense," Lion muttered, stating it was impossible to take this life. Arudo conceded Lion was right, yet his trembling hands prevented him from delivering the final blow. Lion approached Arudo, explaining that it was natural to hesitate when taking a life. Killing demons was an entirely different matter. Sumijan had caused immense damage, and Lion was certain the government would handle him. He was relieved Arudo was unharmed. Seeing Lion before him, Arudo smiled. Lion then helped Arudo to his feet. Lion confessed he was still reeling from the fact that Arudo had defeated one of Euphonia's 12 generals, declaring him a true master. Arudo insisted it wasn't so. Arudo explained that his victory was only due to unforeseen circumstances for Sumijan. He had caught Sumijan by surprise, and fought in a situation where Arudo held an overwhelming advantage. Indeed, had the circumstances been different, he would have suffered far worse injuries. Arudo realized the most crucial reason for his victory was the significant increase in his standard of living, which alone boosted his status immensely. Arudo reflected that had he possessed only one level remaining, he would have certainly perished. Lion observed Arudo, deep in thought, and noticed he seemed unwell, asking if he could move. Arudo replied that he was fine, just thinking, and then asked if he and Magica weren't supposed to be together. Lion explained that she wasn't, as she had left the hotel before him. Arudo then asked where she had gone. Lion stated that no one knew. It was Magica's decision. Arudo reassured him that she would be fine. Suddenly, Arudo pushed Lion away, despite Lion helping him walk, as he sensed something passing between them. Arudo realized he still hadn't fully recovered. Moreover, he saw Citri standing before them, who greeted them, remarking that it had been a long time. Lion turned to Arudo and asked who the girl was. Citri, bewildered that Arudo didn't remember her, reminded him, "I'm Citri Justice, the one who helped secure the dragon's reward, one of Euphonia's 12 generals, an official of the Council of True and False. How could you not remember if your brains are still in place?" Lion, observing her hair, wondered about the spirals and thought the girl looked like a villain. She approached Lion, criticizing Arudo's lack of style for failing to appreciate her haircut's beauty. Arudo retorted, "You mean you're the only one who has any feeling for it?" Turning away from Lion, the girl demanded what was wrong with him. She declared she'd had enough. They couldn't waste time arguing with a stupid commoner. "I am here for Arudo," she stated, pointing a finger at Arudo. The girl declared him evil. Arudo was taken aback by this declaration. "What nonsense," Lion retorted, defending Arudo. "It wasn't Arudo who devastated the city, but Sumijan. Master did nothing wrong." The girl replied that she was, of course, aware of the situation. Sumijan had been removed from his post as general, and measures were being taken against him, but that wasn't her concern. Her mission, she stated, was to eliminate those recognized as evil by God. "In the name of the Judicial Council of True and False," she declared, "I condemn you for your sins." She then lunged at Arudo with her sword. Still reeling, Arudo sat on the ground, realizing he was under attack once more. This time, Lion stood before him, sword drawn, shielding him. Lion questioned the judicial authority's role, asking if it was to murder innocents, declaring he wouldn't allow a single finger to touch his master. Citri, repelled, bounced back. Her attack blocked by Lion's sword, she mused aloud that she had dismissed him as a mere muscular fool, but he was clearly highly skilled. Lion, in turn, challenged her, asking how she intended to defeat him with such a thin blade, asserting he would handle her himself, not Arudo. From behind Lion, Arudo urged caution, explaining the girl's weapon was special. He asked Lion to trust him. Lion advanced on the girl, offering to attack and calling her a curly-haired villain. Arudo tried to warn him. At that moment, the girl struck Lion, and Arudo immediately sensed the danger. Citri then asserted that Lion couldn't defeat her, successfully wounding him. Lion, initially impervious to pain, explained his maximum damage resistance meant the blow shouldn't have hurt. Yet, in In that instant, he felt a sharp agony, and blood gushed from his hand. Arudo could only gasp his name. Clutching his hand, Lion comprehended the intense pain. Arudo, rising and shouting Lion's name, rushed to his side, asking if he was all right. He didn't understand how Lion could be hurt, as Lion believed his pain resistance was absolute. Then, looking at Citri, Arudo realized she, despite her appearance, had activated a special ability. Arudo explained that the sword was an artifact, embodying their belief in absolute justice, and belonged to Citri. Compared to Simigan and the other 12 generals, Citri's inherent strength was significantly less. Arudo even suggested Lion possessed greater raw power. Lion still couldn't comprehend how the girl had wounded him. Arudo clarified that this was precisely why they couldn't win. The weapon cursed opponents stronger than its wielder. Citri, understanding Lion's superior strength, had intentionally attacked him to activate this curse. Consequently, Lion's damage resistance was nullified, leaving him deeply wounded. Arudo explained that she couldn't be neutralized with a single blow. He revealed that even a mere touch to her hair had the same devastating effect. Inflicting too much damage would cost them their own lives. The stronger Arudo became, the more difficult victory would be. It was through this weapon that Citri Justice maintained dominion over 12 generals and Euphonia. Hearing this entire explanation, Lion found it deeply unfair. He questioned Arudo. How could they defeat the girl then? Citri, observing Arudo, realized he possessed an unusual amount of knowledge. She questioned him, did she use this weapon on Arudo? Addressing him directly, she pressed, and where did you acquire such extensive information? She even speculated if he had fought her in a previous life. Arudo dismissed it as a foolish joke, warning that if she was merely stalling to recover, he wouldn't allow it. Suddenly, an explosion erupted, leaving everyone bewildered. Upon seeing the blast, Arudo realized it originated from Cornello's house. He then questioned if anyone other than Simigan could be attacking them. Arudo turned to Lion, urging him that they had to hurry. A moment later, they spotted a blinding light. Arudo sensed a power far exceeding Simigan's. Realizing Hannah was in danger, they found themselves pursued by Citri, who scornfully remarked, did he truly believe he could escape me in such a state? At the same time, Citri pondered, what was that noise? Was it their god fortune shining? She observed Arudo, who seemed to be delaying, his conscience tormented before the gods. Was she right, she wondered, that he was trying to run away? She moved to end this by attacking Arudo with her sword. Arudo, consumed by his own thoughts, wished he had truly defeated Simigan, yet he still couldn't save Hannah. Unexpectedly, Ru proved useful, as Arudo never imagined he would resist Citri. Arudo grabbed the slime, bewildered by Ru's actions, and initially thought it was a joke as the substance spread through his hands. Arudo desperately tried to understand, pleading with Ru to answer and not to die, citing the countless memories that bound them together. The next moment, Arudo was left with only a single split ball. Citri sat before Arudo, who was furious that she had killed Ru. He drew his sword, determined to attack her. The next moment, Arudo found himself back in the familiar void. The figure on the throne remarked on Arudo's obliviousness to the artifact's curse, greeting him with a comment about how long it had been. This was the entity responsible for sending Arudo through 2 lives. It expressed its unimpressed reaction to Arudo losing control in a fit of rage. Did Arudo already know about the artifact's horror? Arudo realized this was the same place he had arrived after his previous death, leading him to believe he had died once more. A chair materialized behind him, and the entity offered, sit down, stating that they now had the chance to speak again. Arudo asked if he had died, to which the entity replied that he had not. His soul had simply reached its limit. He could be reborn, though his current body would be discarded. His soul, however, would remain as it was in his last life. The entity noted that Arudo was living a much harsher life this time around. Shaken by Ru's death, Arudo's soul had been a mere millimeter from complete annihilation. Arudo asserted that he had already died. He then demanded to be returned immediately. The entity stated that before doing so, it had one question for Arudo. What would he do upon returning to that world? Arudo declared he would kill Citri the moment he returned. He would exact vengeance for Ru. At that moment, a rift opened beneath Arudo. The entity then informed him that he could not return to that world. Arudo, bewildered, questioned why, given that the girl had killed his most loyal partner. The creature then questioned Arudo's purpose. It reminded Arudo of the request he made when he arrived, just before leaving. As the creature spoke, Arudo recalled its smiling hand. Seeing Arudo's memory stir, the creature affirmed their shared goals. They could not idly watch as his soul was destroyed before fulfilling its purpose. It advised Arudo to calm down and then reiterated its question. What would he do upon returning to this world? Arudo realized his burning desire for revenge for Ru, but understood that surrendering to emotion would only lead to the loss of even more cherished individuals. He had begun this new life specifically to save Hannah. Arudo explained his resolve to the creature, which then confirmed his understanding. By risking his very soul, Arudo aimed to save someone dear to him. For this reason, they had sent Arudo forth towards victory. Arudo declared that he would resume their bet, stating that there was no possibility of replaying until his soul was completely expended. The blade halted mere inches from Citri's face. She stared at Arudo, urging him to wait and calling him a sinner. Arudo mused that his sword was exceptionally potent against powerful adversaries. However, there was also an ability designed to exploit weak opponents, though its use would curse the wielder as a backlash. He further considered that Citri should have suffered significant damage during her assault on Ru. With a firm gaze, Arudo told her he no longer had time to waste on her. Citri was visibly surprised by his declaration. Turning to Lion, Arudo instructed him to evacuate Ru to a safe location. Lion then questioned if Arudo intended to proceed alone, insisting that he would accompany him. Arudo then turned to Lion, explaining he did not want Ru to suffer any further. His plan was for them to return together once he saved Hannah. Until then, Arudo himself was responsible for taking care of Lion and protecting Ru. Lion, in turn, stipulated that Arudo must protect Hannah and return alive. Arudo smiled, affirming he would do exactly that. Bidding Arudo farewell, Lion then turned to Citra, telling her she should have fled. Citra, however, failed to grasp his meaning. Lion addressed her, pointing out that as one of the 12 generals, her lack of understanding was alarming. He mused that perhaps this kingdom was truly nearing its end. As Lion spoke, other beings began to descend from the sky. Magica ran with all her might, sensing Arudo was engaged in battle. She felt his powerful magical energy and surmised he was likely fighting Simogon, realizing she needed to assist him. Simultaneously, an alarming presence loomed over the Kernel house. She wondered if it was the work of the god Fortimus. Only today had the gift of the germ of God appeared in Hannah's life. Magica understood that divine forces were stirring even before the germ of the hero matured, but she didn't believe it was yet necessary to evacuate Hannah. Then, she witnessed something descend from the sky, detonating the house. It was the shadows of God, and Hannah was in grave danger. Entering the house, Magica witnessed the shadows of God slaughtering its inhabitants, instantly realizing Hannah's parents and the butler were already dead. Vowing not to let them touch the embryo of God, Magica fiercely fought the shadows. She then heard Hannah's scream from the top floor. Realizing numerous shadows blocked her path, Magica ordered them to clear a path, breaking through them as she rushed towards Hannah. A shadow of God stood before her, hurling a sword towards Hannah. Magica urged Hannah to hold on. Her own sword struck the shadow, and retrieving it, Magica addressed the girl, grimly informing her that her dad, mom, and all the employees were dead. Magica embraced Hannah, chiding herself for her delay, but reassuring her that everything would be fine. Though Hannah cried, Magica vowed to protect her, ensuring the shadows would never lay a finger on her again. Arudo also rushed into the house, realizing with a heavy heart that everything was unfolding exactly as before. Defeating Sumijin hadn't altered fate. If so, then Hannah must already be dead, Arudo thought. Just then, Magica called out to him, with Hannah standing safely behind her. Arudo felt immense relief that Magica had saved the girl. Addressing them, he asked if they were injured. Magica cut him off, stating that explanations could wait, and urged them to listen closely. What appeared in the sky were the shadows of God, and now something bigger, stronger will emerge. There is almost no time left. At that moment, Arudo saw another entity descend from the sky. He initially thought it was a demon, but then realized he couldn't believe his eyes at what stood before him. The same sensation he felt when fighting demons was magnified into an even greater power. If natural demons arose spontaneously, this was an entity purposefully crafted by God. It was a good demon. Aruto then worked to undo the hacking he had established during his battle with Sumijin. He understood this would neutralize some of the magic. Thanks to his newfound resistance to this difference, Arudo felt he could act. He instructed Hannah to simply stand still, as he could now fight effectively with his blade drawn from its scabbard. At that moment, the demon closed in, attacking Arudo. Arudo realized her speed was immense. As he engaged the demon with his blade, the weapon shattered under the onslaught. The dragon's fang dagger was harder than nitrile. How could it break? Arudo wondered, evading the girl's relentless attacks. Magica intervened, fending off the demon, and Arudo thanked her. The girl warned him to stay alert, as even she struggled to keep track of their foe. The artifact she carried marked her as a heavy warrior, yet her dexterity rivaled Magica's own, a trait of the squirrel tribe. She was a creation born of God. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Arudo understood they needed to split up. He instructed Magica to take the vanguard, while he covered the rear. Magica acknowledged, understanding the plan, and launched her attack. Magica, whose speed could rival their opponents, would engage her directly. As the two girls clashed, Arudo seized the opportunity, using a microflash to target the demon. Coinciding with Arudo's move, Magica, fully comprehending their tactic, pressed her attack. Arudo, directing beams of light, positioned them to follow Magica's movements as she dodged the foe's attacks. Arudo delivered another blow from a blind spot, striking the demon directly in the back. The demon registered the hit. The damage was minor but undeniably effective. Suddenly, the girls